Alrighty, welcome back to Cinema Pursuit. Today we're talking about the 2017 James Mangold directed Wolverine movie. That's not Wolverine, it's Logan. We're talking about Logan today. Zach, what's up for Logan?
Yeah, we're staying in the States this time. We're not going off to Japan like they did in the Wolverine. We're actually talking about Logan, a favorite of comic book fans everywhere, and a favorite of ours, a surprising favorite for mine. But very excited that we get to finally talk about this movie, and it's good timing with the release of Deadpool 2 or 3. Deadpool 3. We're already on the third one. What is it
No,
called?
no.
Deadpool and Wolverine?
It's Deadpool
Deadpool and
15
Friends?
it's Deadpool
Yeah.
15 at this point.
In preparation for that, we'd like to go back and see the movie that was really the best Wolverine movie, and I don't think that's even a debate anymore, and that is Logan.
No, it's definitely the best one because for anybody who obviously doesn't know, like Zach is not exactly the biggest comic book movie fan in a sense that like he didn't grow up watching these movies. I grew up watching Wolverine, like Hugh Jackman, more than an Iron Man, more than Tony Stark, more than whatever these kids might feel today. Hugh Jackman is that dude and will always be that dude because 17 year or not 17, 24 years technically counting whatever Deadpool Wolverine, he's been playing one character and he owns it more than anybody else.
Yeah, it really has become one of the most iconic characters in recent history for pop culture and movies. I do want to set the background for anybody listening so they understand where we're both coming from. Because, like you said, he has a background in growing up watching the X Men movies. I don't. I think I've probably only seen maybe two other X Men movies and Logan. I think the first X Men and then the Wolverine. Outside of that, I never had an interest in the X Men movies. I didn't grow up on them. By the time I came around to them as an adult, Marvel was in full swing, and at that point I was more into that and didn't really vibe with the X-Men movies, which felt more like the older superhero movies like Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire ones. And I at the time I didn't really care for that era, but Logan was the exception, and that's why we're talking about that.
Bro, you acting like they didn't make good movies back then. You acting like Spider-Man,
No,
like the Raimi Spider-Man still aren't the
they're
best
good.
Spider-Man.
They're good. They're good movies. But at the time, there was a real the Marvel movies when I still really enjoyed them at that point. There was a real like this is how they should be done. And for me, it was actually hard for me to go back and enjoy some of these older style ones because I really enjoyed how they were making them at the time. And
I
then
actually
Logan
went,
completely upended that formula though.
but I mean, it upended the entire formula in the sense that, like, you want to have a formula to rip off, and we obviously know which movie they're ripping off. They're ripping off The Dark Knight like it's nobody's business, but they should be ripping off Logan instead, honestly.
Yeah, and because a lot of people like to compare Logan and The Dark Knight, they're really fundamentally different movies. Chris Nolan's still trying to make an action superhero movie with The Dark Knight. He's just doing it in his own way. Puts the humanity first. Like that's more of a character story that also has action and has some of the comic book superhero stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the story about this character that everybody spent decades or at least a decade with. And that's what they're focused on. And I haven't seen a superhero movie since successfully do the human element first. You can make a debate for Joker, but that one is not like Logan.
No,
It's not the same.
I'll just say it now. Since The Dark Knight came out, the only things to touch the same realm of The Dark Knight, not being better than it, but the same realm of like greatness, it's Logan, Into the Spider Verse, Across the Spider Verse, and the Batman. Nothing else. And I mean that legitimately. I mean, maybe the Suicide Squad for me, but in the sense
Not
that,
for
like,
me, but I get what you're
yeah,
saying.
but like in the sense that like this is actual good filmmaking and this is something that's enjoyable just as its own thing. Like this is a beginning, middle, and end, and that's it. Like
So
whatever happens happens after that.
yeah, what do have all those movies, maybe besides the Suicide Squad, have in common? They're pushing the medium in a different way than it's been pushed before. So it's
100%.
it's innovation that makes those movies great. The Spider Verse movies are innovative. Logan's innovative. The Dark Knight is very innovative. All of those movies are trying to do something different. They're not trying to stick to the formula, or they're taking the formula and subverting expectations in a way that hasn't been done before. And that is part of the genius and the risk that creates great movies.
And Mangold, he talks about it heavily that he wanted to make a movie where it's like, this is a character movie. We're going to use the influence of The Wrestler, Paper Moon, and Little Miss Sunshine. We're not talking about Old Man Logan. We're not talking about anything else. We don't want to talk about another X Men movie. And the most they do is like Xavier's like, oh, New York, like, the Statue of Liberty thing from like X-Men 1 from like
Yeah.
17 years before. It's supposed to be like 20, probably like 20 or 30 years probably before that, but still, it's a long time ago, and it's just meant to be a reference of like him having dementia and going crazy essentially. And they bring it all back. Mangold brings all the references back. It's not just him writing this movie, but all three of the writers. It's them going all the way around and bring it right back to this. There's no flashbacks in this movie for a reason.
Yeah, the point you made about like him having dementia, the superheroes having like real problems that real people have. Logan has what essentially is the version of cancer that he can have because obviously cancer couldn't get him, but he has that poisoning and that is basically a cancer. And so then Patrick Stewart, he has dementia, he has all these other issues going on. These are like real world problems that people have. This isn't like some superhuman villain came in and injected them with something or put poison in the air. This isn't like kryptonite. This is giving these superheroes real world problems that people have had to deal with. And some people watch and have family members who've had to deal with. And I think that makes it even more relatable and was smart on Mangold's part.
And I think it's elevated. It's elevated realness in the sense that it's the adamantium that's killing him, right? It's cancer, but it's even worse than cancer because it's a
Yeah.
cancer that's following him around for his entire story from X-Men 1 all the way to this movie has been about, okay, I have this entire memory and I lost that memory. Why did I lose that memory? And you haven't seen X-Men Wolverine, the Origins movie, the one that was, in that movie, he shoots himself with an adamantium bullet so he can forget what happened and like how he got the skeleton and all that. And obviously in X-Men 2, they show him like who's the dad from Succession? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
Brian
God.
Cox.
Yeah. I just want to say Logan Roy.
I'm not gonna say his famous line, but I want to. But so he's the villain in X-Men 2. He's the one who injects Wolverine with the adamantium and all that and makes him a killer. And making him a killer and then him regretting being a killer, but it's the only thing that he knows. Even though this is not a Western, it very much plays into the Western. And we're gonna talk about Shane because obviously Mangold loves Shane.
I'm surprised you
And
said it's not a Western because I felt like
no,
it's
no, it
pretty
is a
obviously.
Western.
Oh, okay.
It is a Western.
Okay. So I was about to say it's pretty obvious. Like it's on the nose at what it wants to be. It even shows you Shane. It's definitely makes a lot of choices to try to be a modern Western, a neo Western, or a post Western. I don't know what the term is now. That's a very interesting way to frame a story like Logan because none of the other X-Men movies or nothing about Wolverine as a character in general lends itself to being a Western type character, besides the fact that maybe he's a little rough around the edges and toes the line of anti-hero sometimes. But the desire to want to take something that's almost like the movie Unforgiven
Yeah.
and use that older Western hero dealing with his past idea is fascinating for a superhero movie.
And Unforgiven is definitely an influence on this. And it's the most influential Western movie for him besides Shane. Even though it's that he mentions Paper Moon, which is it's essentially a father-daughter duo. It's a road movie. And then Darren Aronofsky's Wrestler, which doesn't seem like, the most typical thing, but it's like a tragic story. And this is a tragic story. This movie, like I think about Logan all the time, but it's a really hard movie to rewatch because as they have like 10 other movies that are pretty fun, but this is their best one. But it's also a hard movie to watch because it's like some of my favorite characters ever, like of any media. I have to go and watch them die, and that's not easy. It's never easy.
Yeah, you notice in these movies there's always a trepidation to killing off a beloved superhero. We'll see it teased a lot. I remember one of my frustrations with the first Avengers movie was how they teased killing Iron Man, and I remember at the time I was like, they should have just done it. They should, how bold
Yeah,
of a movie would have been. And of course, they can't do it. There's no 50 movies that we have now if that happens. But sometimes it's like when you keep teasing you're going to do it and don't do it, it's not effective. It's not effective when you do that. So them to be like, this is the final, even though it's now we know it's not the final Hugh Jackman Wolverine movie, but at the time it's like this is the final movie. There's finality to it. We're gonna linger on, spoilers obviously if you were not ready, but we're gonna linger on his grave at the very end, and none of these rocks are moving. We're not shaking the rocks. We're not showing a hand coming up from the grave. He's done. This is finality. We're giving you finality. And stories these days don't do finality because they can't sell more movies. But James Mangold wanted to give X-Men fans and Wolverine fans and fans of this huge arc, this character that's beloved, finality in the story.
He leans into that conversation about how he's not a fan of these movies in a sense. This is actually the time to bring up Mangold himself.
When the conversation came around to making another film with Hugh as part of this series, I was pretty disinterested in it, unless it was going to be a film that was my film that just so happened to feature that character, as opposed to, I don't know how to explain it other than I don't think these universe movies are really movies. They're very expensive TV episodes
It goes with the anthology nature of comics in general, in which it's a continuing saga of sorts.
It's its own. I think it's its own interesting semi-political topic, because the comic books reinvent the characters all the time
and kill them off
and redesign them. But I find it's always really interesting, because people are real film fans, and then they're also really angry if the movies ever deviate from each other. But in a way, it's a contradictory goal, because you're not going to get expressive and interesting films if you're asking the filmmakers to live by a kind of immovable Bible and semi-religious Bible, that even the innovation that happened in comic books happened because new artists came and reinterpreted these characters.
And as a screenwriter on any adaptation, invention is important, because if
Absolutely.
you're too dogmatic, it's dead on arrival.
Well, it's not a movie, meaning that a movie, to me, should have a first, second, and third act. It should have a beginning, middle, and an end. It shouldn't be a continuation of someone else's work.
I love what he said there, that he doesn't like when you have to just stay within the realm of this Bible, this source of truth that you have to use in it's like guardrails in what you're making, because we see that in Marvel a lot, where somebody who's not the director will come in and will say, this is the guardrails that you have to operate in. These characters have to show up, these characters can die, these characters can't. And the thing about filmmaking is that it's an expression of, I don't want to get into the auteur theory thing, but part of filmmaking is that you have one person who is at the helm, the director, and their vision, when it's put through so many different other people's checks and balances, comes out with the most generic or bland way that they can tell the story for the most of the part. But when you don't have those guardrails, like Mangold seems to not have had in Logan, you can really tell the story you want to. You can put in flaws. You can kill people. Patrick Stewart, that was one of the most unceremoniously deaths I've ever seen in a movie for a major character. You could not do that in a Marvel movie without 10 different executives signing off.
This is all praise to 20th Century Fox, RIP technically. Number one, they gave them the money to make this. They were like, okay, we're going to give you like $125 million to make a movie like this. And they said from the jump, like he said, like, you didn't want to make this movie if I didn't want to make this movie. And the movie I wanted to make was my movie. And he was like, okay, it's going to be R-rated. It's going to be like this. So the whole point of it being R-rated is, yeah, you get the actual violence and all that sort of stuff, but it very much was like, we don't have to market to kids. We don't have to make toys for this movie. We don't have to do all this other stuff. We don't have contracts. We can just make our own movie. And he said that the experience making this movie was one of the most free experiences possible. He made exactly the movie he wanted, meaning that he got to write the story he wanted to write. Number two, no one, listen to this. No one interfered. No one questioned his actions. Like all the stuff he did in this movie, he just got to do it. No one said anything to him. And for that to be the case for a comic book movie, shoot, that is the ultimate freedom. And it's the freedom that he got. It's the freedom Lord Miller and all the directors of like Into the Spider-Verse got from like Amy Pascal and all those people. It's a rare freedom to get. I think Nolan got it probably too for his movies. But it's like you have to give these people the freedom creatively to do this. And a lot of these people, a lot of the movies that I really like that are in the comic book genre are the ones where they have writers who got the freedom to just run with it. And it really works.
I think that was a great point you made, and I want to expand on it, that the best comic book series that exist are the ones where they let the writers go whichever way they want with it, because they know at the end of the day they can just undo it or just put it in another universe or whatever. But like the Frank Miller Batmans, great comic books, they let him go whichever way he wanted to go with it. I am really blanking because I haven't read some of these in a while. What was the Superman one where
Kingdom Come?
Superman, yeah, Kingdom Come, that one.
Yeah.
Great comic book series. There's also the very famous one that they used the poster for when they did Justice League. You probably
You're
have to
talking
cut
about that.
around this.
You're talking about the Alex Ross ones.
Yeah, the Alex all the different Alex Ross ones. Like, but what the point I'm trying to make
Iconic work, man. I
is
understand.
that in the best comic books, they let the creative, the person who's driving the project, dictate how they want the project to go. And we don't see that in most comic book movies, which is what made comics great in the first place. So there's this disconnect between what makes a good comic book movie and what makes a good comic. And Mangold and what you said specifically there really touches on that.
And what's crazy is that if I really had to liken this, or so real quick about this movie being R rated, the one of the best things about this being R rated, besides having to deal with all the themes of like dementia patient, all these things going on with him, the stuff that's going on with Laura, and then the violence itself, they couldn't show Wolverine stabbing somebody, physically stabbing them in the PG-13 because that means that it's automatically an R. You can shoot as many bullets as you want, but as soon as you do that, then it's R rating. So that's why they go so crazy with the stuff. And just from the action perspective, it is fantastic work. It's nothing to where it's like they're doing some crazy out the door stuff, but like this is like realistic on the ground. Like you said, Unforgiven. It feels very real. It feels very Western, but it feels like it's unchained in the best ways possible. And besides that, like if you really wanted to compare this to something else out there, like Logan, you'd have to compare it to like The Boys. And The Boys goes so crazy with it, but The Boys doesn't have the heart that Logan has. And that's why this works. Both of them are amazing to me, but like I love Logan a little bit more.
Well, and the difference there too is Logan still has sincerity. The
Oh yeah.
boys is more tongue in cheek, a little fourth wall. There's a sincerity to Logan that most comic book movies again don't have, where they're cracking jokes most of the time. It's that style of, we're gonna tell a joke every 5 seconds, and you're not gonna leave any scene not laughing at something. Logan is sincerely trying to tell you a human story that's not happy. When I watched this with Kat, this is both me and her's first time that we watched this since the theater. One of the things that she remarked to me that there was almost no points for her to find joy in this movie, that it was a very sad movie.
I
And
don't
I
know
know,
about
and
that.
well, no, like not in a way like she didn't enjoy it, but more like this was a movie of brutality. This is a movie of sadness. This what everybody's going through in this movie. They only get one little moment of happiness. Charles does, and after that, everything goes to again. So really, there is no, unlike every other superhero movie you're ever going to watch, this is not a joyful one.
Bro, see, that's the problem. That's what I'm saying. They need to make more movies like this. It doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily mean they have to be this sad, even though on if you look at the text itself and you just read what Wolverine's story is, Logan's story is that it is a sad story. It's a terribly somber story about like just a person who got put through the system essentially to got taken advantage of by these corporations, put the adamantium in him. And then the thing that made him terrible is the thing that he's good at the same time. He's good at killing people. And then on top of that, it's what's killing him at the same time, right?
Hmm.
There's no boogeyman. There's no, there's this villain sitting in the background, clapping their hands like, oh, I'm the villain. No, there's no villain like that. And the one time, like Dr. Rice at the end of the movie, he comes out with a spiel like that. What happens, right? Bro pulls
Hmm.
out the gun and he's like, it's like, you don't expect, that's the whole point of this movie is that you don't expect him to get shot in the face, but like they wrote that scene. There's a lot of scenes that they wrote for this movie. They're like, okay, this is too big. We're fighter jets are gonna come at the end of the movie. The White House gets involved, and every time they had a conversation like that, they wrote scenes. They cut that out. They're like, now we're turning into another comic book movie. We don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. And they had the vision of like, we don't want that. And there's a thing of like, it's the same thing with the Pandora's box. It's like Marty was talking about it with filmmaking, but it's very much with the writing too. It's like you have all these tools, especially as like a comic book movie, but you need to know when not to use it. And people need to take from Logan and not use it. Restrain yourself, put limits to the sandbox that you're working in for your characters, and it'll make all the difference. And the problem is that people like Marvel, like Nia DaCosta directed the Marvels, and she's like, yeah, that's not my movie. How is it that she spends probably probably 2 years of her life making a movie, and she's like, oh, that's not my movie? These people, they took it from her. They didn't let her do what she wanted to do, and that's why she has to say something like that. It
We see that.
sucks.
Yeah, and we see that happen over and over, and it's at the point why I never get excited about who the director of a Marvel movie is, or even most comic book movies at this point, because what they do is they take all the agency away from the director and just have them there to do the technical work. It's no different than they could have hired pretty much any second unit director probably, and they would have had a similar product. And we saw this even with Eternals, where Chloe Zhao was totally, you know. I
Nerfed.
don't know and I don't know what part was her and what part was Marvel, but that movie was horrendous.
I ain't seen the movie.
And
It got brown people. I am not gonna delve
yeah,
into that because I have people. I have like this girl I know, Rithi. She 5 out of 5 loves that movie, and yeah, she might be in like the 1% of the 1% that actually likes the movie. But yeah, overall, people didn't like it.
and I wanted to like that movie. I'm just telling you, I really wanted to like that movie because I was like, okay, they're giving it to someone who just won an Oscar. Nomadland was a good movie. She's up and coming. Let's see what a real, up and coming director can do with this. And it was just a horrible product. It made no sense. And you can even look at the movie and tell there's parts that it looks like she wanted to do and parts that Marvel wanted to do. And you can see the conflict in real time in that movie, and what comes out is a mess. And so it's again another testament to why you need to give the directors freedom, or otherwise, what's the point of getting a big name director besides just to sell more tickets? That's what they're
How
doing. They
no,
get
but
her to
seriously,
sell tickets. That's it.
how many characters are there in Eternals that they
Oh, like,
introduce?
dude, it's probably it feels like a dozen. Probably is. Like
Okay,
it's a ton of them. Yeah.
so if it's a dozen, Mangold's intention with Logan was that he wrote scenes with Magneto. He wrote a flashback at the opening of like we see the school and how everyone dies. Like he wrote flashbacks for that. We saw Magneto as a character, and he was like, "No, let's take all this out. Let's take all this out," because he wanted focus. He wanted this. He wants you to focus on Logan, Laura, and Charles. That's it. I don't want to
Yeah.
talk about anybody else. And we get Caliban. And Caliban's great in this too. Like Stephen Merchant, fantastic in
Yeah.
this. But even then, he's serving the plot in the best way possible. And he has his own arc that really works. But Mangold was talking about how, like, you have a comic book movie and it's got 3 set pieces and you have 2 hours or 2.5 hours. You have 8 characters, and he's literally sitting there like talking, doing the math. He's like, you have maybe 10 minutes to have an arc for each character, and then you kind of have to have. Or he says it, in much blunter standards, but he's like, you make all this BS and you have these character moments, but they all feel fake. They're all hollow because you don't actually have enough time to develop the characters. And that's why this movie is what it is, because they have the time to develop it. They take their time. It's not the pace is like tepid. It's not like a slow paced movie, but when it comes to the character arc itself, it is paced properly. And that's awesome.
It's this tendency that we need to make every superhero movie bigger than the last. That's been going on for so long now, to
Yep.
where every superhero movie, you got to find a way to up the stakes, to have bigger action, to have a bigger group of characters, to have more things going on. And that's not what movies are fundamentally. Movies are fundamentally about telling a story, a personal story, a human story. And Logan, like you just said, does the opposite, where it shrinks it back down. It brings it back to the ground level. It brings it back to Logan, Charles, and Laura. Those are the three. That's it. Everybody else is to serve that plot. Those are the only three we're meant to care about, and the only three that have a real coherent arc in this movie, and that is by design.
And I was listening to Jeff Goldsmith, the Q&A podcast. Fantastic. He talks about writers, with writers, about their writing and all that stuff. But even he's like a comic book nerd, and he's literally like a comic book nerd. Oh, I got another one too. What's funny, I will say this real quick, that the coordinates are actually in the comics in the movie, and it's kind of funny that the comics, a lot of them are kind of oriented towards Cyclops. So like, yeah, Cyclops probably wrote them in the world and dropped that coordinate in there because he's the most, like, whatever, from Wolverine's perspective, he's
Yeah.
quite self-aggrandizing.
Can,
It's hilarious because like
can I
that his
ask?
attention.
Can I ask you an X-Men question? Because I thought this during the movie and I didn't look it up.
What,
where is Cyclops during this movie? Is he alive? Is that
bro?
just up in the
Okay,
air? Like what's
so
going on?
since you said that, I'll let the man answer for himself.
Okay.
Flashbacks earlier is a possibility, and I'm curious if you ever had a flashback of what happened at the academy because it's mentioned a few times.
I wrote one.
What was it like?
It was distracting because it immediately would have me, you'd be asking me who was in it, who died,
Everybody died clearly, but
well, no,
right?
You're saying that, but
sorry,
but the to me, again, my whole thing is trying to avoid the trap, the frankly journalistic trap of getting into, like, I think it's why our country doesn't get anything done, is because we've constructed this thing where every time you propose something, people find a way to unwind you and get you on your heels. And the thing is, like, yes, I had written this, but the second I would put it on screen, I could see that the movie would be about, what, you did that to her? Why did why didn't what and half the answers would be, we couldn't get that actor, or we could get that actor, or we could or we don't have rights to that.
It just would be showing an interesting way for this movie that's the final film of Wolverine to be
all I can say
reunited.
is I read the script. I wrote the script that way, and it was distracting, meaning it made the movie about X-Men and not about these characters.
Interesting.
And so my sense was, how do you do this like Tennessee Williams would write it? How would you do it like there's a tragedy back there, but it's back there. We don't have to see it. Just because there's death and traumatic things doesn't mean it's the big open. Because again, the wrestler isn't going to have a big open. Little Miss Sunshine doesn't have a big open. So what happens is you find yourself writing that scene and going, I did it again. Now here I am at the academy, and there's a disaster, and it's a big open, and now it's an epic movie, and who did this? And now we have all these questions, and now I'm going to be at Comic-Con answering these questions for the next 3.5 hours. And
So
I love it. That's
you
a great
see,
answer.
you see what I mean? He said all this in 2017. I don't know how this man did get vilified. Like, I don't know if people
Yeah.
didn't listen to him, but like, people want to talk about Danny complaining. They want to talk about Marty complaining. This man literally directed the crap out of one of the best comic movies of all time, and he's complaining because he has a place for it.
It's pretty present now in modern discussion. Look at The Acolyte just came out. I haven't watched it, and I probably won't. The
I
Star Wars TV
I haven't
show, and I
either.
see people on Twitter already getting really angry about little details they're putting in about, I don't know, the Jedi with the giant, like vertically giant head, whoever that guy is.
Yeah.
They're
I know what you're
mad
talking about.
because they changed his birth date or something in the shows, and then the shows had to try to find a reason to say why his birth date's different in the show, like he was hiding it or something. I don't know. And it's like you said, is when you throw little backstory lore details in there, people now will focus on that and ask a million questions, and it takes a focus away from what the story is. So he was like ahead of the game with that, man, because we
Yep.
see that happening now with all these TV shows and other movies that are trying to put little lore things because they know it makes viral clips, it makes YouTube videos, it makes content, it makes content, it makes content, it makes content. That's why they do it. And he was avoiding all that trap.
And the problem is that you already know when Deadpool Wolverine comes out, it's gonna be, people are gonna be like, oh my god, look who's in the movie. And it's like that, like Mangold's entire point, he talks about it further in this, is that I don't want to do that. We don't need stuff like that. I think are like Hughes only doing that movie just for fun and just to like work with Ryan because he likes him as a human. But that's about it. Like, I don't, and plus it's like making a $200 million movie is probably a fun time and it's a great paycheck. But besides that, like Logan is the definitive end to his character. And even everyone says that. Even Ryan recently, they were like doing an interview with him. He's like, yeah, like Deadpool kind of came out at the same time. It's like, yeah, we were doing our thing. But then on the other side with Logan, like they delivered one of the best, or like he said, the greatest comic book movie of all time, which this is actually in the contention for. It's not for us necessarily the one, but it is up there for us. Actually, Zach, drop the top 5 if you got it for
Okay.
your comic book
Oh,
movies before we
I
get
don't
into
know if
action as a juice.
I don't know if you want this. I don't even like my top 5 now.
My top 5 comic book movies of all time for my taste. This is not in any order. Don't come after me for this. Spider-Man 2. Raimi, obviously. Don't even say Amazing Spider-Man 2. Into the Spider-Verse. The Dark Knight. Logan. The Incredibles. And then Cap 2, like Captain America 2, the Batman. They are like in the lower, but like those are my top 5. Incredibles, Logan, Dark Knight, Spider-Verse, and Spider-Man 2. Obviously, you can see where my taste lands.
Oh God. Okay. I'm gonna give mine, but I'll just let everybody know I've changed it 50 times and I still don't like it.
Bro,
And
I'm about to judge you. I'll judge you.
this is
Don't
this
worry.
isn't this in my and I just want
I'll
to
be a
say
neckbeard today.
I just want to say for the letterbox heads out there, I rate movies based on how I like it, not on what it is generally perceived as. So these are my favorite personal 5. Sorry in advance. So, do you want me to do an order? Do you want an order?
Or do you have an order?
I have an order.
5-1 then.
Okay, 5-1. Okay, number 5, Zack Snyder's Watchmen Ultimate Cut.
This mother.
I told
I
you you
thought
ain't
you
gonna
said
like
you
this.
don't like the movie anymore. You said
I,
it's going down.
Watchmen is my favorite comic of all time, and he does a pretty good job of trying to recreate that, even if he misses the point. So I really do like the movie still. It's just I don't like the misreading it.
I'm not stuck in here with you. You're stuck with me. It's like whatever. I love that scene with the the
It
grease in the guy's face. Come on. I do
yeah,
love that.
that's again personal taste. Number 4, Dark Knight Rises. Come at me, okay? Come at me. Personal
Bro, the
taste.
Batman and Batman Begins are better.
Yeah, well, I haven't got there. Okay.
Okay.
3, Thor Ragnarok. This is the only Marvel
Understandable.
movie I have on the list. I had what was Infinity War on the list and I took it off. I had
I'd
Civil War
argue
on the list and I took it off. I had
I'd
Iron Man on the list and I took it off. So those were all in contention when I did this. I like those movies as
Captain
well.
America 2 and Guardians of the Galaxy are better.
Another one, like all those are around the same level. That's why doing
But
5
those are
was really
better
tough.
because even Mangold, he even gives love to Guardians of the Galaxy. Spielberg gives love to Guardians of the Galaxy. Not that you should love something because they love it, but for
Yeah.
me, I love it because James Gunn actually does do something authentic with it. And Thor kind of comes in with its own thing, does its own thing. But then after that, bro, Love and Thunder,
No,
they
the
lost the
biggest
sauce. They lost the
massive
sauce.
disappointment because I thought Ragnarok was like the height of that Marvel humor that started with Guardians and it kind of ended with I feel like the
Ragnarok.
humor of it ended with Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Um, so number 2, Batman Begins. I watched that a year or two ago again, had a new love for it. It's pretty high up there for me. And then of course number 1 is The Dark Knight. So 3 Batman movies, a Zack Snyder Watchmen, and 1 Marvel movie. Logan, I had on here, and I was just going back and forth because, again, really, everything below The Dark Knight is literally just depending on how I feel that day. If I did this yesterday, I probably would have had like Logan and Civil War up there. But it's just depend. I just woke up today and
Bro.
was like, I want to be spicy.
Yo,
I want to throw
no,
Watchmen and Dark Knight
no.
Rises on here.
As soon as you watch Silver, you're gonna be like, I was stupid. Not that Civil War is a bad movie. It's just it's not gonna age well in my opinion. I really don't
No,
because I was always Team Cap. Like everyone else was Team Iron Man. I was always Team Cap, but it's like that movie, the construct of that movie and the inner conflict of it, it works. I think it's really good, but it doesn't really leave me coming back. Besides like Wakanda Forever. Like Black Panther, I gotta roll up for him.
the part I always liked about that movie was just the in fight between Cap and Iron Man because I felt like that's the closest the Marvel movies had ever gotten to like real human conflict
Yeah.
between those two characters. Like that was a real human moment that they had, and that's the closest I've seen them get in most of their movies, and
But
that's why I come back to it. But I haven't rewatched that in years, and I don't really
I'd
plan to
argue
rewatch it for a while.
I'd argue that Days of the Future Past, like X Men Days of the Future Past, X Men 2, much more human stories, even though they pack the 2000s fun. At least X Men 2 does, but Days of the Future Past, yeah, it's got the multiverse kind of thing going on before they started, overdoing it recently, but it's compelling and it's emotional. And by the end of the movie, like it really, I'm not condoning Bryan Singer by any means. I want to say that because I grew up watching these movies. I didn't know he was a bad human being. And I blame Hollywood for even giving him these jobs in the first place because someone else could have done this stuff and still made it great. But whatever. I'm not gonna like. I love those movies, and I think you would like them too, man. Like, I don't see Civil War being, it's not peak. It really is
Yeah.
not.
But we'll definitely have to do Days of the Future Past because that is one I do want to watch.
Before we get into Action of the Juice, I will run down my X Men ranking. But for you, I did force Zach to watch X Men like 2000 and X Men First Class, and so my ranking, I'm gonna go from top to bottom or bottom to top. The worst one for me, not X-Men Origins. It's not Wolverine. It's X-Men Apocalypse. That one just did not work, and it
Which
felt
one's is that the Sophie Turner one? Okay.
that's later. Or she is in it. I think she is in it, but it's forgettable. Oscar Isaac is the villain, and they
Oh,
nerfed this
okay.
man like it's no like they have no business nerfing him. And then second one, is going to be X-Men Origins, obviously. Then Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix
Oh,
actually,
that's the
I,
Sophie Turner
I
one.
think they had compelling stuff in there, but they just really did not get it to work. But it is what it is. X-Men 3, The Last Stand. It's fine. I'm not going to talk about that guy. That guy sucks too. Then it's Deadpool and the Wolverine. Those two, Wolverine works, but the last third of that movie, just there's good action, but it's not something that you want to come back to. Deadpool, I'm not really going to talk about. It's a bit, I wouldn't say immature, but it's just like, I don't know. The first one, I love Tim Miller as a director, but I don't like that movie that much, really. X Men First
Yeah.
Class is the one after that. I think Fassbender and McAvoy, they make that movie. Their chemistry in that movie is excellent. That's why Days of the Future Past works in the first place. But rewatching it with you, like back at your old place when we watched it, I was like, this movie is not aged as well as I wanted it
Did I
to.
did I watch that? I didn't.
Yeah,
That
no,
was.
no, no. We watched it. We watched
Do
it
I have
because
it
I remember.
rated? Like
I
I
re-
didn't realize I watched that one.
no, we watched it, and it just does not hit as well.
I
And
didn't even rate
step
it. What
above
the
that,
heck? Yeah.
it's X-Men, the 2000, and Deadpool 2. I did enjoy that one. Probably if I watch it again, I probably won't, but that's the level it's at. And for the 2 and 3 spot, I have X-Men 2 and Days of Future Past, and those are like if I want to watch one of these X-Men movies, and not that I rewatch a lot of comic book movies in the first place, but if I really want to watch one and it's like a compelling time that's not sad, it's going to be X-Men 2 or Days of the Future Past. And obviously number one's Logan by far.
Yeah.
It has to be Logan.
Yeah.
And I say that even though it's not necessarily a fun movie, but it's like the most compelling movie by far, and it's one of the best ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you know, so does Logan stand way ahead of all the other movies that you listed?
It
Movies.
is. It's at least a point ahead. In a 10 scale, it's at least a point or a point like 1.5 ahead,
So
meaning
there's at least a good
not that we're
distance.
like
Yeah.
intelligizing that so much, but it's the distance is far enough to where it's like the other movies, they're compelling and there's like an emotional thing there. Like I said, X-Men 2, they literally have a fight in the room where he was like injected with the adamantium, right? That's the third act fight in that movie. And that is compelling. It was compelling when I was a kid. It was compelling 2 days ago when I watched it again, and that's going to hold up. But they were in a PG-13 in the early 2000s, and they essentially built up upon that. They made it a lot better with Logan. So it's like there's a connection there, but it's just timing and freedom essentially of like what you're writing.
Which movie does Halle Berry get hit by like a tsunami? Which one's that? I've seen
Oh,
that one too.
X-Men 2, I think
I've
technically.
seen a lot of these then
No,
apparently.
that's
Yeah.
X-Men 2. I mean,
I didn't
she's in
remember
it,
it.
but
Yeah.
like Jean is the one who's like holding it back, and then like Jean dies in the end of the second one. But that's why X-Men 2 is good because they actually kill a character. They actually kill her, but then they bring her back the next movie, and then she's like, oh,
Yeah.
she's the bad guy now.
I think that explains my point a little bit then that,
Yeah,
if you're not gonna actually do the deed properly, then what's the point, you know? At this
exactly.
point, it's
And
old.
no, but in Logan, they do the deed.
They do.
The deed is like
Then
they give him the X on the grave, and X marks the spot.
do
He's
you know
probably still there.
that SpongeBob clip where he's like, "Am I gonna defile this?" Or no, it's Mr. Krabs, and he says, "Am I gonna defile this grave for money? Of course I am." And that's just Marvel doing that to Logan, just digging up Hugh Jackman's corpse to come back and be in another movie.
And like I'm holding judgment. Like I like watching Logan and X Men 2. I'm excited, like a little excited to see Deadpool Wolverine now because of those movies. But I'm not there to just watch cameos. I really am not. Like I think it might be the best Deadpool movie because they have Hugh Jackman, and Hugh Jackman's going to bring something because he's still, no matter what happens, he's still one of the best actors working today. I'm sure you're going to have a companion movie for this that shows exactly what that is. That being said, action is the juice. The most juice scenes of Logan. What is your juice scene for Logan, Zach?
So the farmhouse fight, this wasn't what I went into the movie thinking it would be. I thought the casino scene would because I remember really liking that when I first watched the movie. But the farmhouse fight has everything, man. It's the level of brutality there is just not seen in most superhero movies. Heck, it's not seen in most films in general. That there's three shocking things that happen basically. One, the whole family is killed, even the kid. There's a Wolverine clone that's the literal manifestation of his past coming to haunt him. And then 3, and this is the most shocking, and it's a big reason why I have so much respect for what this movie's doing. Charles Xavier is killed in a very unceremonial way, but in a way that still makes sense to his narrative and his character's arc. It does both. It satisfies his arc and it shocks the audience. And that's hard to do. So that whole scene in general puts the movie on its head. It flips the movie, it flips where you think it's going, and then sets up the movie for the finality of the third act. I just love it. It's great storytelling, great writing.
When it comes to like Xavier's death, I was reading the script last night, and there's a part in the bathroom where he's telling him to take the pills, and they're having a conversation, and Xavier tells Logan like, "Okay, as soon as we drop off Laura, we can go get the Sunseeker." And that doesn't really seem to be the vibe of what he would be saying in the movie. I think he was just saying it so Logan would get her to North Dakota and actually something would happen for him. And Xavier's smart. He always was smart. And you can tell even with his like his issues, he's still a smart guy and he's trying to
Yeah.
do something for Logan. He tells him like even in that scene, we'll get into it in dialogues where it's like he's telling him at the house like take this in, like this is what a real life looks like a loving family. You have this this core around you. And Xavier knows he's been in Wolverine's mind over all these years. And he's like, yeah, this man has not had love in his life, not truly. And that's one of the main themes of this movie. And the other thing is, Mangold's talking about how in the scene where X-24 comes in the bedroom, he's talking and he's trying to put the camera around the room. He's like, I put in a Lego piece of this camera shot to where it's like it's this heartfelt moment and you're feeling all these things. And it's just if you watch movies, you're gonna recognize this as being like the Oscar worthy, like somber moment, right? And he's just leading you in, and then he puts the hand on his chest, and he's
Mhm.
it's just it breaks your heart every time you watch it. And I don't think there was a ceremonial death to be had there with Xavier. I think Logan gets one because it's like he lived for 200 years and his last moment might be the greatest moment of his life. Farm scene is definitely the most like comic book scene, like comic book movie. Like
Oh
we're
yeah.
cutting from one thing to like the guys are showing up and then they get their head ripped off and they're getting, like X-24 is going after them and Caliban is like with the grenades. And then on top of that, like Laura's got her thing going on. Xavier, or like Logan's trying to get him to the truck. And it's like, that's what the movie feels. That moment, that scene feels like everything is just running, running, running in the best way possible. It is literally the action of the movie.
It
Kind
really
of.
is. Yeah. What did you have as your scene?
Bro, there ain't no other scene. You already know what it is. You know how it is for me. I want catharsis. I always look for catharsis in these movies. And it has to be the last 10 minutes of this movie that it is the ending. It is Wolverine's death. It's not necessarily like him, injecting himself, running and like doing all the stabbing and doing all that stuff. No, it is after all that he gets plopped on the tree trunk and X-24 dies by the adamantium bullet that Logan wanted to kill himself with, which is saying a whole other thing. And then she rips him down and like he's holding her hand, and after 200 years, he finally feels. He says, "What did he say?" He's like, this is what it feels like." And then I've someone else like another interpretation, like, "Oh, it's like this is what dying feels like." No, I think he's talking about love. He's thinking about
Well,
that. It's like this is not Tony, okay? This is not Tony dying in Infinity War. And I think there's a direct comparison to be made where it's like that is like, he's like, "Oh, I am Iron Man," right? And it's like cinematic and Alan Silvestri's scores playing. This is not that movie. This is the anti movie to that in the best way possible. This sticks with me. Tony's death does not. I think it's emotional. I cried during Infinity War. I cried more during this.
I'll tell you what it's a reference to is the farmhouse scene we just talked about, where Charles is in bed and he's trying to explain to Logan, like, being around this family, this house, this life that they built. This is what life is. This is what it feels like to be loved. That's what Charles says to him, basically. Before, Logan goes away and then the fake Logan comes in and kills him later. And so at the end, when Logan says, "This is what it feels like," that's a callback to what Charles was trying to tell him, that this is what life's supposed to be. And Charles was telling him that he still has time. But like the movie Shane, like what we're told to believe, it's too late. Logan's done too many bad things in his life. He can't go back to town. He has to leave. and in a literal sense, he has to leave this
He
earth.
can't break the mold. He
Yeah,
can't break the mold.
it's tragic. It's a tragic
Yeah.
death. It's a heroic death, but also a tragic death. And it's not supposed to be a clean cut. Logan gets everything he wants at the end. It's that Logan understands what it's like to be loved at the end, but then he can't stay because he is not good enough to stay in this world at this point.
That's why if anybody else made this movie, it would be corny.
Hmm.
And to say that they gave so there's a lot of movies that came after this that were like, okay, we're gonna kill off our main character for this trilogy or this set of movies, and every single one of them they work, but they're not as good as this. And okay, spoilers for anybody who's a James Bond fan, I guess. No Time to Die is a complete rip off of this scene. And No Time to Die does not, it is nowhere close to being this good.
I
Craig,
like the ending of it.
you don't know the ending's good. I'm not saying it's bad, but the whole there's a lot of times where recently where they're making those James Bond movies and they're like, okay, we're just gonna do Logan, we're just gonna do the Dark Knight, and that's Skyfall for Dark Knight. This Logan was obviously No Time to Die, and it's still not they're like the movie's almost 3 hours and they're trying and this
What
is
was
me
Spectre?
as the biggest Bond fan. What
What was
Spectre?
Spectre?
Spectre was like freaking 10 hours.
It was the Green Lantern.
I dragged this man to go see it. And after that, I was like, why is this movie? That was one of the most disappointing movies we've ever seen in theaters,
Oh yeah.
especially after freaking Skyfall and Sam Mendes is back and all this stuff. We should have listened to those Sony leaks because they said the movie was not good. They had script problems and it
Yeah,
shows.
it did.
And it's like, no matter how good of a production value you got, you put 200, $300 million behind a movie, it has the biggest explosion of all time. Literally, Spectre did, but it's still not going to make your movie good. And Mangold understands that. He does, doesn't he?
It
And
does.
it's like Wolverine, he bringing it back to this scene. It's like he had the curse of immortality, but it's like in the last moments, he gets to be mortal. He gets to be loved, even though he feels like he doesn't deserve it. Because every time he says it, like every time somebody's around me, something bad happens to them, they die. Because whether it's Wolverine Origins, whether it's like Jean, whether it's a lot of people that he loved that died, and it's like a relationship love, but this is familial love, something he's pretty much never felt. He did have a brother in X-Men Origins, but even then, like, he turns bad and there's all this stuff going on, and the whole point of this movie is just to be like he dies with his heart in his hand. In the Wolverine, the one that you don't like, the girl, she can see the future and she tells Wolverine, like, you die with your heart in your hands, and what he dies in his hand with is Laura's hand. So it's like it's poetry. And even though I assume that Mangold meant for that, but even if he didn't, like, poetry in motion, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And to have that high of a high for like emotionally after 20 years, after 17 years of like watching these movies, it means something. And I didn't talk about it before, but it's like I saw this with my dad. I saw this with my brother. Like, we grew up watching these movies together. I took him to see X-Men Origins when we were kids. Like, I still remember us, like, being about it when we got out of the theater. But this scene was that scene. It still is that scene. This is one of the best scenes of any comic book movie, period. You better agree with that.
No, I agree with that completely because it actually is a real emotion and isn't like a cheap emotion either. It's not. It's earned. It earns its emotional weight and it delivers on it in a way. And like I said earlier, it doesn't do anything at the end where the rocks are moving or where a hand shoots up or where there's like, oh, you might still
Bro.
be alive. It's finality, and the finality there is earned and well delivered.
Oh, he uses his last moments. We know he's going to die. Like, that's just, the
Mhm.
inevitable. But he uses the last moments to help his daughter, to help the new future get across the border of the mutants. And it's the best part for me is always her turning the cross to the X. That just, it feels like they ended the X-Men movies for Fox. That's the ending for me, honestly, of like
Yeah.
my childhood. That is the ending. The ending. It doesn't matter to me they made the Dark Phoenix or whatever. That's the ending. Because it feels like thematically, emotionally, just them doing that. It's like, don't forget who this man was. Don't forget that he actually saved lives and saved the world. But it's like, at the end of the day, he, like, that didn't scare Logan. That's the point of this movie. He did not get scared by saving the world. Saving the world and dealing with these like elegant bad guys is like another Monday to him. It was like, oh, okay, let's get this over with, right? While he's like smoking a
Yeah.
cigar. That's Wolverine, and we love him for it. But this movie, yeah, I'm telling you, after I rewatched it last week, I just it's been hard. I'm not gonna lie. It's just thinking about it because like it really means that much to me. And him and Xavier dying, like it's just it leaves me speechless because they really knocked it out of the park. But for all that being said, production value. What is the production value for this movie? The most impressive piece of this movie, whether it's behind the screen, on the screen, anything in between. I think we probably have the same scene. What is it for
All right.
Logan?
I didn't pick a scene. I just wanted to
Oh,
talk
okay.
about the action choreography that they do the same thing John Wick movies do, where Hugh Jackman is getting his butt kicked the whole time, but really just as often as he's beating other people. He doesn't win any fight cleanly. Every fight he's coming out with more bruises, more scars, more issues that either he's having trouble to heal himself with. He's constantly taking beatings the whole movie. And the movie makes a thoughtful effort to show him wearing down as it goes along. So then when we get to the end and part of his issue is that he's exhausted and really hurt, it's earned. It's not just given to him. We see throughout the whole movie how he's gotten to that point where he's at the end.
Actually, it's funny. The scene at the compound, like where they're staying, like across the border, they have a lot of great action in there. And at one point, when they're like on the motorcycles chasing the limo, I was like, Mad Max? Hold up. It felt like Mad
In the
Max.
desert,
And
yeah.
and Laura, all the wire work that she probably like that actress had to do, she is fantastic. She's
Mhm.
amazing as X-23. And it's like she's probably like one of the little humans that like just pulled it off perfectly. And there's not really you can't name a lot of young actors that have done action like that and it looks fantastic. It's the little moments. It's like when he's whipping the limo around and she like jumps onto the hood and then gets in the car. I'm just like, this is such a Wolverine. This is awesome. And that whole actually no reason why I bring up Mad Max is actually one of the guys, Stephen Dunleavy, like that I mentioned in Mad Max. He actually is in the movie. He's one of the guys chasing them
Oh,
in the movie. Yeah. And then he jumped to John Wick 4. I mean, like that's like these guys. That's how you know like Mangold obviously watched Mad Max, got influenced by it, and there's a little bit of sauce in his movie because of that movie. So it's like
yeah.
you see the influence of Mad Max even with this. I love the action in this movie because, like I said, they had the R and they went ruthless.
They
They're
made it
ripping
work.
off heads,
Yeah.
bro. When he's standing over Xavier's grave and you just see all the blood on him still, it's like, oh my god, like this man is really going through it. Best part of that though is like when he's at the car and he's just taking that dodge and just like smashing it
Oh, yeah.
with the shovel, and I'm just like, oh, you don't need like this is the best way to show the anger for Logan. And Laura's just like, I guess I got to go get this Bronco.
Yeah.
Let's go beat OJ real quick.
Josh. Yeah. What did you have for production value?
Oklahoma casinos, man. We got to go to Oklahoma one day.
Dude,
I actually have to go to Oklahoma soon, but the Oklahoma casino scene is
I
fantastic.
love it.
That's like that is them having the whole scene of the seizure is that there's not a lot of CG there. Apparently they were just using like a stabilizer and then they're shaking the camera. They're just shaking the camera and with the stabilizer gives you that, the image is trying to stabilize but you're shaking the camera so it's like it gives you that effect. And that's awesome. It looks awesome. And like you said, the action, him having to get out of the elevator and he's like trying to get to the
Yeah.
room and then the guy is frozen but he's like looking at him. He's like, I'm about to die. Right. And it's all of it's awesome at Laura trying to get to Xavier and it's like the acting is crazy good. All the stunts, all the departments, they're on point with that scene. And before all that, we get the scene of Shane on the TV and Laura sitting there in Xavier's chair, just like, wheeling herself around. It's really cute. And then obviously the whole thing of like, oh, this is all fake. This is all fake. All that
Yeah.
stuff. It adds elements. And the scene in Fury in the middle of the movie where they like have the reprieve, the dinner scene.
Hmm.
That's what this is. And I think some of my favorite scenes in movies where it's like you have all this crazy stuff going on in the movie, but then they take the time in the middle of the movie somehow to actually do character work. And that's what that is, right? And I love it.
Yeah, them getting to the casino and then them getting to the farmhouse are both times in the movie where they give you a break. Because when a movie
Yeah.
that's this serious and a movie that's this bleak, you have to give those breaks, or otherwise, it really is not an enjoyable experience. They like them, Charles getting all the clothes, and all of them getting into their new outfits. Like that's a little thing. Or Charles sitting on the bed watching Shane and talking to Laura about it. All those little things are both character moments and then a moment for you to breathe until inevitably it gets bad again.
All the character moments that they have within the casino scene, like the Oklahoma casino scene and the Munson farm scene, it very much it shows that Mangold is making like it feels like a 70s 80s movie. If you watch Ford versus Ferrari or Walk the Line, you see those things. But the problem is that Indiana Jones 5, like you see the same elements, but they're not as good as these. And I'll talk
Yeah.
about it in the legacies, but I think the thing is, yeah, we get Shane. He loved the movie Shane so much. We don't. This is not called Wolverine something something. This movie's called Logan, very much in the same vein, where it's like the production value, even for the name of this movie, is ground up that they stripped it all away. The production value is there, but they didn't want it to be flashy. They didn't want it to be poppy. And I think the movies in the 70s and 80s, the ones that like people still go back to, whether you're talking about like Godfather, Apocalypse Now, all those things. Yeah, there's production value in those movies, right? But it's not the main thing. The story is what's keeping you there the entire time. Like you want to
Yeah.
see the descent into madness when it comes to Apocalypse Now. You want to see, Sonny dying and Michael becoming, the Godfather and all that stuff in The Godfather. And obviously Shane goes even before that. That's a Western. And this movie feels like a Western. I do want to throw one real quick thing in. Boyd Holbrook, the guy who plays Pierce, the guy that's chasing them in the Oklahoma in the casino scene when they leave, when they like rush out of there, and he gets out. I don't know if you remember the shot, but he gets out of his truck and he literally almost falls down like the stairs. Do you remember
Yeah.
that? I was just like, this man really committed to that one
Yeah.
moment. I'm like, this is the level of acting I need in my movies. It was awesome. Even though he's like a small villain, he very much is like very dark. Like the darkness to him is
Yeah.
it's apparent, but it's very real because like typically when it gets to dark people like that, they're fine with it. They accept it, and he's kind of funny. He's very funny in this movie.
Yeah, no, he's a good character, and his ability to say like he was a fan of Wolverine and him,
I'm a fan.
he makes a quip at some point like, "Hey, do you want to work for the good guys now?" Like he clearly thinks what he's doing. Like he at least believes in the mission to go and wipe out any remaining mutants. So even though he's an evil character, he doesn't see himself that way, which is good because I don't always enjoy when comic book movies are like, "I'm evil and I'm going to do evil things." So
And Mangold says very much, he's like, I don't like the word bad guy. Because once you say bad guy, you're labeling them one way. And it's not always so black and white. He's like, the thing he keeps saying is like, no one wakes up every day and they're like, oh, I'm going to go do something evil today. The people genuinely believe, no matter what bad thing they're doing, that they're trying to do something good. Whether it's this, whether you're talking about Sam Jackson and the Kingsman, whether any villain ever, and like they just think they're doing their job or they're doing something to help the world essentially, right? And that's what he thinks. He thinks that, and then Dr. Rice, who gets killed, he thinks that. Everyone thinks that they're doing something good. I don't know if you caught it, or actually, let's get into it. Dialogues. This movie has, I think, one of the best scripts for a comic book movie ever, and the dialogue is fantastic. And the first dialogue I want to talk about is there's almost a throwaway line from Dr. Rice that through energy drinks and all this food and all this processed stuff, they essentially he likens it to polio, like eradicating polio, that they got rid of the mutant genes that way. And I'm just like, whoa, whoa. And he throws in the line and it goes by so fast. And like you're like almost like caught off guard by his death too, which is awesome. But it's like that line. And there's also all these little hints of like, oh, like this is not corn to like farm like to eat. This is corn for like corn syrup. And there's all these little things that he throws in there. And I'm like, he's kind of likening this to like adamantium also, where it's like there's this product that's been intaken and it's kind of killing you, but I don't know. Look, he had something to say about that stuff, about like not necessarily like GMOs, but about something.
yeah, there's something in
I think
there
it's
that
about corporations.
I think so. I think it's just corporations making decisions for, or even the government making decisions for the people that maybe is not great. I honestly, I didn't figure out when I watched this time what he was going for there, so I don't have much to add.
I think at the end of the day, he's just trying to say that like it's there's people who are in power that don't necessarily know what they're doing and they think that they're doing the common good, but it's not necessarily the common good, especially killing off all the mutants. I don't know. It really rubbed me the wrong way hearing that line. But there's some good dialogue. What's the dialogue for you?
Yeah, so the part that really stuck out to me this time was when the robot trucks run the Munson family off the road, and Charles Xavier wants him to stop and help him. So this is just a quick little back and forth. They need our help. Logan, someone will come along. Charles, someone has come along. It just reiterates that the difference between Logan and Charles Xavier, that Charles still, even in his old age, even when the government's turned its back on the mutants, even when society's turned its back on the mutants, Charles still feels like that their goal in life is to help other people. It's important to everybody's life is to help other people. Charles, telling Logan and trying to teach him still that we are the people that are supposed to be helping. When you, or anybody, when you see someone in trouble, and you're not supposed to think, oh, someone will come along and help them. No, you're the person who's come along. You're the one who's been chosen to help here. Go help them. And that just little moment is a good character work to me.
It's good character, it's good life
Hmm.
lesson that you can't just it's there's in Mr. Wallace's class, like AP Lang, like we read about this true story of a woman who was in, I think it's New York, and she got stabbed, and then she's yelling out for help, help, call 911, call 911. And everyone was like, oh, someone else will call, someone else will call,
Hmm.
and she ended up, passing. And that's the situation. You can't be apathetic. And I think a lot of the good, I keep bringing up Batman Begins, man. It's about shocking people out of apathy. And it's like Wolverine has some real apathy in this movie because
Hmm.
obviously of everything he's gone through. It's understandable, but it's not understandable. And it's also a thing where Mangold's trying to talk about is like, yeah, if a superhero actually existed, how many people are you supposed to help? Who are you going to choose to help? When is enough of helping people? When is it not enough of helping people? Are you going to have an actual, there's so many different elements to it, but that's all to say that when it comes to your real life, like help people, like you don't, you just, if you're blindly helping people, no matter, expectation, that's going to be something real. And it doesn't really matter what happens after that, but it's just like you did your part and you just go on your way. It's like that's just how I live my life. If some old lady asks me to get something off the top shelf at the grocery store, I do it, and I'm like, have a nice day. I just keep walking. You don't have to be a superhero to do good things for people, and it's just do it. And that's what Xavier's entire point was. And he was trying to, enrich that within other mutants. But it's like that's why there's a whole argument of Magneto and Xavier and the two schools of thoughts that like one of them was nurtured. Like Charles was nurtured, and then Magneto, like Eric, where he started and where the pain that he got from the humans in in Nazi Germany and all this stuff. And it's like there's so many themes and things to explore with this, but it's not the conversation today.
Yeah.
I will say though, one of my favorite lines is like, "This stuff is not real." This, like, when it comes to the comic books, he's always leaning on it. That he's like, "This stuff is, yeah, like this is probably one of the only movies where in a comic book movie that the comics exist." And he's like, yeah, we have comics, but that's like, yeah, some of it happened, some of it's not true, and it's not what you think it is. And this whole movie is a sobering experience for audiences, and it is for Logan, that it's not what you think it is. This is not as like, it's not Superman, right? It's not the moment of, the first flight where it's like, it's magical. He doesn't feel that magic at all in his life because everything that he's known has been pain, essentially. Like, and he's had moments of love and all these things through his life, but the bad stuff really gets to him sometimes, obviously.
Yeah.
And that being said, what does he say? The scene when they finally get to Eden, he says, "Oh, do you have nightmares?" And she's like, "Yeah, I do." And she's like, "People hurt me." And he says, "Mine are different," right? Because obviously he's the one hurting people. That's what
Hmm.
he feels like. That's his curse. Right after that, she pulls out the bullet and she's like, "What's this?" She asks in Spanish, actually, like what the bullet is, the adamantium bullet. And he's just like, same thing they put inside us. That's why it can kill us. It's probably killing me right now. Anyway, I got that a long time ago. Kept it as a reminder of what I am now. Now I keep it to, and then like he cuts out. He's like, actually, I was thinking about shooting myself with it, like Charles said. And it's like he's confiding with his daughter and actually being truthful to her about how he's living and what his mindset is. And it's like almost a parenting lesson in a sense, but it's crazy what the conversation really is and where he's at in his life and where she is, and he's trying to teach her a lesson ultimately that like he says that like, yeah, I've killed, like she says, oh, I've killed people too, almost trying to relate to him. And he's like, and like, she was like, yeah, they're bad people, but he's like, it's all the same.
Yeah.
And that says something, right? That says something about his character, that people have written him off as like just the coolest killer and all this. Is like, no, it catches up with you. I was talking about it on Blade Runner. That's like Deckard is killing his own people. He's killing the robots that he is himself, but he doesn't realize that he is that. But he doesn't like to be who he is. He's a Blade Runner. He gets almost praised by like the commission, like his sergeant for it. But he's like, I don't. He doesn't like doing what he does. He literally tries to find a bottle, and then he has to like. It's a whole thing with Blade Runner too.
Well, I wanted to bring that up because that was the other quote I was going to bring up too. What you said is that the whole you're going to have to learn to live with that, and Laura's rebuke that there were bad people, and Logan saying that it's all the same. That ties directly to the Shane idea of that. Even though and even you can say this ties to the idea of Batman too, where the idea of if you kill people, good or bad, you still have to live with the fact that you took a life.
It's
You
it's
still have to
still
live with the
wrong.
fact that you ended a life. It's still wrong.
It's
It's
still wrong.
morally wrong. And Logan here is making the same argument that, good or bad, whoever he's killed, it's something he has to live with regardless, because even if he did it righteously, he still has to grapple with the fact that he ended a human life. And obviously he's struggled with it. You can see he's an alcoholic in most of these movies, that he struggles morally. He's very irritated the whole time you ever see him, and that's how so he's really never dealt with
Yep.
it. He's tried, but he's never found a way to deal with it, and he's basically telling her the same, like, hey, this is a gift, but this is a curse, so you're going to have to learn to live with this too. And it's just a great it's a great character insight that they give to him not long before the movie is over.
And it's something where it's like no one else can teach her that lesson. He is
Hmm.
literally the only person that can.
And he
And
can't even tell her how to deal with it either. You have to
yeah,
learn to live with it.
yeah. And one of my favorite lines, like the throwaway lines, is the Munson mom. She asks, like, "Oh, is that your daughter?" He's like, "Yeah, that's Laura. That's my father, Chuck."
Hmm.
I was like, Xavier really is a Chuck, isn't he?
Yeah.
and he's just like, he's like, "Hey."
Yeah.
But I'll end dialogues on the hardest one, which is from Laura at the end of the movie, and it is Shane, where it's like, "A man has to be what he is, Joey. You can't break the mold. There's no living with a killing. There's no going back. Right or wrong, it's a brand that sticks. Now run on home to your mother and tell her everything's all right. There's no more guns in the valley." Right? And that's from the gunslinger in Shane, and
Mhm.
goosebumps, man.
Yeah,
Especially in the
yeah.
context that he brings it back for. It's like it's a movie referencing a movie. It's like that Tarantino thing, but it's like it is beautiful.
It is, and again, it just goes back to the point to where sometimes a character, even if he is the hero of this movie for us, sometimes a character has just done too much destruction in their own time on this earth to just ever be. I I'm trying to just grapple with it because there's a lot of things of what it can mean, but I feel like it's like a loss of innocence in a way, to where in Shane, it's him telling him that I can't come back because I'm no longer innocent, but you're still innocent, so run home to your mom. In the way it's said here is that Laura's still innocent at the end of the day. That Logan wants her to go. She still has time to change herself, to change her character, but Logan was always too far gone to change.
I think people can change. No matter what age they are, I think people can change. I think I wholeheartedly believe that as a human, that anybody can change. If you really care to change, if you want to change, you can change. And it's for him, if he had more time, and that's the thing, the curse is mortality and immortality for him, that he loses his immortality and gains mortality at the same time with his daughter, with that love. And that's the beauty of that scene. I mean, if Wolverine lived on, he would have ran with them and stayed with them, and he would have taught them, and he would have had a loving relationship with his daughter. That's what would have happened.
Yeah.
But like you said, this movie is not giving you an easy ending. This is
No.
not an easy ending. He has the ultimate sacrifice he has to give is that love,
Yeah.
right? And it's a sacrifice that he's been giving his entire life. And that's
The-
why he's like, oh, that's
yeah.
that line. Scott Frank wrote that line where of like, oh, so this is what it feels like. And like I said, other people interpret it as being death. No, he's talking about that love. Where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I finally am feeling the love of like a child, and this is what I should have had in my life. And it's
Yeah.
emotional. It's there's nothing more to say than he, no matter how bad and all the bad things he did, it's not like he was like, even he deserves to be loved. And it's a theme that comes back in Harry Potter in the fifth movie, where he throws, like Harry throws it right back at Voldemort. He's like, it's not my fault that you don't have anybody. It's like, I feel bad for you because you don't have anybody that loves you. And you could bring that right back to real life. There's a lot of people who feel alone and this and that, and they feel the need to contemplate killing themselves, and it's because they don't feel, they don't feel like they belong to something. And I'm gonna get all, see, this is a very deep movie for me. It feels like these themes are explored, but it also feels like they're not sitting there telling you, there's no spoon feeding. And that was Mangold's whole point, that I don't want to spoon feed this to you. I'm going to leave it there for you. But you need, as an audience, I want people to find this and actually think about this stuff. So that's why I think this is easily some of the best dialogue for a comic book movie. And it's a great script. There's a reason why this was nominated. 100% deserved.
Definitely.
But that being said, they got some music in this movie, Zach. So the Layla, the best needle dropper use to score for Logan. Drop me with it.
Yeah, it's just a simple one. When they're in the gas station and they play the song "I Got a Name," I just like that needle drop because it's another direct way that the movie signals to the audience that it's a western, because it pulls it directly from a movie just a few years before that, Django Unchained. I looked at the history of this song, and it's actually not used in other westerns as far as I could find before Django, but then it's used in Django and then used in Logan, two westerns back to back, and I just found that funny. And I have to assume some of the inspiration for Logan had to come from the movie Django, just based on the song choice there that he dropped in.
Django. I think Martin, he got the OG Django, and I was just like, yeah, that theme, man, it's fantastic. And obviously Django Unchained is fantastic too. But for me, I think I love the score for this movie. It's one score that it's on the scores playlist yet again. And I do listen to Marco Beltrami's work on this. And you know what's different about this movie? There's no strings. This is not an orchestra movie. And Mangold says about it is, I wanted a more 70s feel. I wanted more of a kind of a thriller or detective score movie, a more intimate score, something that wasn't trying at every moment to bring the London Philharmonic to bear on the action. And you see that there's pianos, there's a harmonica at one point. It's a leaner score, but in the best ways possible. And it's not like the music's not there. There's music in the whole movie, and it really hits. And they should take note, because even Into the Spider-Verse, fantastic songs in that movie soundtrack wise, but even the score itself is inventive, crazy inventive.
Hmm.
And last year, Across the Spider-Verse, if Oppenheimer hadn't come out, I think that was the best. That's like one of the best scores from last year. Daniel Pemberton, who incidentally, coming on the pod, our next pod is Steve Jobs, and that is scored by Daniel Pemberton. A little 6 degrees on our next episode.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can't believe you said Spider Verse. It's the second best score, not the score from Killers of the Flower Moon or Mission Impossible or
No,
maybe even the
I mean,
Holdovers. Like, come on,
no,
man.
no, not for me.
What?
Not for me.
What?
Not for me.
What?
I'm not saying it's bad work. I'm not
You
saying
gonna
it's
talk
bad
about
work.
Robbie Robertson
But
like that, man? Like with the Killers of
I'm
the Flower Moon?
R.I.P.
Disrespect,
man.
disrespect
Jeez,
to the guy, man, to
man.
the
Don't
genius.
even don't even. I'm not gonna harp on Donald Sutherland, man. But Donald Sutherland, we lost a goat this week. We
Uh,
lost a goat couple days ago, man. And I'm gonna talk about someone right now in Layla that who's gone too, and it's like some of these great artists, they leave everything on screen or whatever their art is, and it's unforgettable what they do. In Donald Sutherland, I talk about him with my own dad, right? That like we just love the man. He just has this energy to him on screen that is you gravitate towards him. I think he was like he's got lead roles, but I think he felt more like a character actor to me. And every time he came in, whether it's like President Snow or Animal House or Invasions of the Body Snatch or anything in between that he's done his entire career, just like whoa, ooh, here we go. I gotta sit up. It's like you gotta like, oh, that's my dude right there. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Not every movie he was in was good, but every movie he was in, he brought something to it. He never
He brought the
subtracted from a
juice.
movie. He never provided a bad performance. He was always genuinely giving his best effort in every movie. And again, you bring up Hunger Games, that introduced a whole new generation to him as this
Bro,
iconic
wait,
character for that
he is
group.
so good. He is so good
Yeah.
in that role that they could make $100 million movie about Hunger Games, like Ballad and Songbirds and
Yeah.
Snake. They could make that movie. I know you didn't enjoy the movie, but you know I love that movie. I really did, and it's 100% because of Donald Sutherland. They can say whatever about the text. I respect the text. I respect all that. But when it comes to the screen, that man was ruthless on screen. He brought the juice, and you respected it.
Mhm.
And on the same like on that same level of acting, it could be Italian Job, where he's like this loving father figure, right? And then he gets killed within like 5 minutes, and that kind of sets off the entire movie. His death dictates the entire movie. And F. Gary Gray did some great stuff with that. But I'll bring it back to the Layla. But yeah, this is about to get sad for a minute yet again. So before I even get to that, the trailer, go anybody who hasn't seen the trailer for Logan, I'm sure you have, but go watch the first official trailer for it. Johnny Cash's Hurt plays in that and is one of the best trailers of all time. That trailer, there is rarely that you watch a trailer like, oh yeah, that's the movie. That's actually the movie. Nope.
I should have grabbed. Actually, that should have been my Layla. Just I didn't know if it was eligible or not, but I should have picked that because
Oh,
you remember
I
all
wonder.
the.
I wonder who makes the rules here. We make the rules. That's the whole
Well,
point.
it's really funny because that Johnny Cash "Hurt" song is almost overplayed at this point when it comes to like movies like this. But that trailer was just the perfect use of that song, and I don't think I'm gonna find a better use of that song ever. We just need to retire it from trailers and from movies at this point because that was the peak use of that Johnny Cash song.
100%. And every time I think about that song now, I think about that trailer. I think about
Yeah.
Logan, and that means that every time it comes up on shuffle, I'm in pain, legitimately. Like,
Why
and
you
I
have that
mean,
on
the
your
thing is,
shuffle? That's
yeah,
like that's pain, man. Why are you putting that pain on yourself? Take that off.
there's also Logan or their La La Land epilogue. Every
Why?
time
Why are you doing
I
that?
just hear the I like life. Hey, you gotta live risky. But yeah, the actual Layla is the end credit song. It's Man Comes Around by
Oh yeah,
Johnny
that's a good
Cash,
one.
which like at first I was like when I saw the movie, I was like, this kind of feels weird. And then I actually like listened to the song afterwards, like, oh, okay.
I
And
want to
you're gonna love this story.
I
It's a
just want to
terrible story.
reiterate for the
Go ahead.
audience that he also directed Walk the Line. So clearly, James Mangold has a huge appreciation and fascination with Johnny Cash. So him using two
And
different Johnny Cash songs, even though "Hurt" was originally a Nine Inch Nails song, but him using two Johnny Cash songs is just continued to show like how much reverence he has for him. And I love Johnny Cash too, so I just wanted to point that out.
James Mangold, when he was making Walk the Line, he had already written the script and everything, but he was still having conversations with Johnny Cash before he passed. And he just asked him, like, what was your favorite movie? And he didn't give him his favorite movie, but he told him like one of the most like effective experiences he's had. And it was when he was 8 or 9, Johnny Cash went to go see the original Frankenstein. And when he saw the movie, people were horrified. And I didn't realize this about myself either, but it's true that when I watch Frankenstein, I don't, or even Johnny, like, I don't relate to the human characters. I relate to Frankenstein. And at 8 or 9 years old, Johnny was like, I wasn't horrified. I felt relative to Frankenstein. And Mangold talks about how it's like, he very much lived an inner torturous life even from a young age, and that's just Johnny. That's what his life was, and he relates it right back to Logan, that that's what Logan's life was too. But that's fiction, and Johnny's life was real, and that's why he brings Man Comes Around for Johnny, and it really is the perfect needle drop to end Logan's life on as a character.
Sorry, I'm not sure. I wasn't sure where to go after that.
No,
Uh,
no, that's perfect. It just
okay.
that's the nail on the coffin. That is the X. It's the X man. X gonna give it to you. Okay. Actually, you know what's funny? Listen to this. You know who should have been in this movie? Come on. Let's recast the role in Logan. Who would you put in this movie? Cause I don't think I really did not. I was I was feeling too much for this movie. I really could not do this time around.
Yeah, I struggled with it because, you can't, because this is an X-Men movie, one, you can't really replace Charles Xavier, you can't replace Logan, you can't replace Hugh Jackman, you can't replace Patrick Stewart. So you have to look at the other characters who are less prominent in the movie and honestly less consequential. I looked at Richard Grant's role as Dr. Rice. So I would say
Which
that's
he's
probably
great in.
he's great, but I would say that's probably the one part in the movie that I don't love, like the one role, because it feels a little bit too much like a comic book villain performance, like an evil doctor.
But I
So
think that's the whole point. That's the
it
only one
is.
where it's like, yeah.
I get that's the point. So, but I was thinking more in a Western way that I would actually want to try to change that role a little bit. So instead of having Richard Grant's scientist villain as the villain, I would want Timothy Oliphant in the role. He's like
Oof.
the best example of a modern cowboy actor.
He
But I would
cooked.
want him,
He
yeah,
cooked.
and I would want him not to be a mad scientist, but I'd want him to be more of a pragmatic villain who's old enough to have seen the destruction that mutants have caused, and but he's more of a bureaucrat than a scientist. So instead of them flying in a scientist to deal with this, they're flying in like the CIA director, or they're flying in some sort of black ops
They're
team
yeah,
director. But it's
exactly, yeah.
Timothy Oliphant, and so he brings that Western gravitas that this movie's trying to emulate as the main, quote unquote villain of this movie.
What's funny is he's the villain in Live Free or Die Hard, Die Hard 4,
Mhm.
and he's playing the same sort of role where essentially there's a fire sale going on where they're essentially taking over the system of like America, like the fundamental structures, and shutting it all down and holding holding the government essentially at ransom. And there's all this crazy stuff going on where he's not a bureaucrat, but he's almost on the edges and trying to do something with the government. So it's like he could play that role so well. And Oliphant definitely could have, he would have cooked in this movie. But I think, I mean, in the tenets of this movie, yeah, Dr. Rice works. But if you wanted to add real sauce to a villain, that feels so much more like 70s, 80s vibe. That would have worked so well.
Mhm.
I feel like Mangold would be like, oh, that's a good idea, actually.
Well, plus, like you said, the whole speech about them putting stuff into foods and all that. I think coming
Oh,
from
yeah.
someone who's like a government, like the whole thing about trying to get rid of super or mutants, having someone who's more representative of the government, I think would have been a good idea. Not like I said, this doesn't the current Richard Grant performance and role doesn't take away from the movie for me. But when I was watching, I was thinking, I was like, there's other ways they could have gone with this. It could have been a lot of different types of characters that could have been the villain. So that's where my head went. Did you
No.
come up with anybody for yours?
So it was tempting to do Stewart and Hugh, like Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman, but I grew up with these guys. Like, I've this is very much the same thing. Like, I'm gonna shout out casting because like this is they're been watching these people since I was literally a child. I've seen these movies tens of times, many times. Grew up with this stuff. I'm a legitimate fan, and I can't change it. Like I thought of Dacre Montgomery for Wolverine. Like if they ever did a new one, he was in the Power Rangers. If you saw that, he was Red
Yeah,
Ranger.
he was
He's the
also
brother
in
from
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. Yeah,
That's where a lot of people
but
probably know him from. The brother, the
um,
older brother of I don't remember her
yeah,
name, but yeah,
Sadie Sink's character.
yeah,
Yeah, Max.
yep,
But I think if he grew out the beard and it got like a more rugged look, he looks kind of boyishly handsome, but I think he's got the sauce to be that sort of actor. But I mean, people throw around Daniel Radcliffe. I mean, I'd be fine with that. I think the other roles I was thinking about Laura, and I was thinking about like Caliban, Stephen Merchant's character. But I think they embody those roles so well that
yeah.
I can't really see anybody else doing it. Stephen Merchant, bro,
He's great.
one of the funniest moments in this movie was when he has the gun in his hand. He has like the gun in his hand. He's looking at it. He's like, "Bro, what am I supposed to do with this?" And I'm just like, "Okay, yes, that's what I'm saying. There's comedy in this movie. This is still a funny movie. The comedy's there. It's just you need. I think this movie's well rounded. You need comedy to like lighten up these very deep swings that they take character wise."
Yeah, I would say the only other person I really thought about putting in would have been Jeffrey Dean Morgan, because I just feel like anytime he shows up in a comic book movie and
Have you been
he can
watching
do
The
it.
Boys? Have
Yeah,
you
I
been
know,
watching The
dude.
Boys?
I about yelled when he showed up. I love it. For some reason, when he shows up in a comic book movie, it's just like, yep. Like, and I'm talking about Walking Dead. I'm talking about the Batman versus Superman. I'm talking about Watchmen.
The
Whenever he show,
Losers.
yeah, yeah. Whenever he, the boys, like whenever he just shows up, it's like I don't know why, but this guy's destined to be in these type of movies, and I just want to keep seeing him in it.
I think he has this he has a charisma to him
Mhm.
where it's like as soon as you see him, he's just like, oh, something's here. And it's the same thing. It's his doppelganger is Javier Bardem. It's the
Yeah,
same energy where it's like
yeah.
as soon as you see them, you like sit up in your seat like, oh, something's gonna be good here. Imagine
Some
Javier
charisma.
Bardem in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Like in the role you're talking about, or
Oh
even as
yeah.
like Dr. Grant, Javier
Yeah.
Bardem and Logan, like he would have been. But that's the thing, he's a fantastic actor with this like amazing stage presence, right? And I said this before already on the pod, but Steven Spielberg is talking about how he's talking to Denny about Dune Part Two. For he wrote a letter to Denny. The second letter he wrote was to Javier because as Stilgar because he loved him that much.
Mhm.
But it's like he's that level actor, and he would have taken too much, like from the movie, from it being Logan, Laura, and Charles's movie. It wouldn't have worked, but we could dream.
Yeah.
But on the soapbox, get up on that soapbox, Zach. You got a soapbox take?
So actually, I am going to generously use this as a way to let you rant for a little bit, because I actually have a question. So,
Okay.
as someone who's not an X-Men fan,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think the future of the franchise is going to be now that Disney has bought it, and they seem unsure about going full reboot with it. They even brought Hugh Jackman back for Deadpool. Like, where do you see this going anywhere, and where do you see it going, and is it going to be successful?
So full spoilers, they at the end of the Marvels, they have a post-credit scene where they introduce a character as an X-Men character, and obviously Deadpool Wolverine is coming out right when we're releasing this, and they're essentially been dragging their feet in some ways, trying to like introduce the X-Men. I think it was something where Kevin Feige was like, "Yeah, we've got plans already." I don't know what those plans are. I'm not going to pass judgment right now on that, but yeah, they want to put these characters in this world, and I hope they respect the characters. I hope that they look at. I see that's the problem. I don't know if they're going to understand the themes fully, because it's like there's a lot of themes. If you watch X-Men 2, there's very much scenes where they're talking about like, oh, like there's a scene in X-Men 2 where one of the characters, he has like this ice power and he goes back home. There's all this other stuff going on, but he goes back home, breaks into the house with Wolverine and his girlfriend, all these characters. And his parents are like, "Can't you just stop being a mutant?" You get what I mean, right? Like, can you
Yeah,
stop being gay? Like that
yeah,
sort of thing. Whereas like there's some real elements of like other themes going on. And they I don't know if they have it in them to actually respect it. Where it's like they made X-Men 97, they made an animated show already. It's really good and it's got the sauce, but I don't know if they could do it in live action. I don't know if they can truly respect these characters because they can make a fun movie. Sure, they're going to make fun movies, but are y'all going to have genuine character moments for because that's the problem. Once you start making one of these movies, you're gonna have 5, 10, 15 characters. Bro, the rumors of like Avengers having 100 something characters or whatever, or like 60 main characters, who wants that? Like genuinely, like no one wants this. And for them to think that that people want this, that's therein lies the rub, right? That they're gonna go down. Their hubris is gonna bring them down very much, and I hope they don't. They ruin X-Men. And not that's not to say that, 20th Century Fox has done some amazing job and they've knocked it out of the park fully. I think they've hit a lot of great marks, but they haven't hit it fully yet. No one's hit it fully yet. And the rumor, I don't really. like to follow this stuff, but they were throwing around that Jordan Peele. I felt like he had a general meeting with Marvel, but they were saying the meeting was actually for X-Men. That's the problem. If you actually got Jordan Peele to make X-Men, do you think they wouldn't have that shoulder on his, be like, hey, make sure you do this. Make sure you throw in this.
Yeah.
Make sure. And it's like, there you go. There's the death. There's your character death. You're killing your movie right there. You're stabbing it in the ribs. It's A2 Brute. That's what's
Yeah.
happening there. And that's what they're going to be. No, literally, it's going
Yeah.
to be if X-Men or if Marvel is the Caesar, they're their closest friends. Like the producers are the ones, not the, I don't want to, single them out, but like that creative energy is what's going to kill them. It's what gave them life. It's what gave them power, but it's also going to kill them too.
Yeah,
So
this movie making by studio panel is what we've been seeing with a lot of these Marvel, but honestly, all these Disney products,
tentpole movies,
and they've not been
Mangled.
successful.
Yeah,
And
Mangold really singles it out as being tentpole movies because he knows it's not just one movie; it's a lot of these movies.
yeah, and so I don't really see a successful X-Men franchise happening with the current superhero fatigue, but I also don't see Marvel stopping the train. And so these are going to be made,
I'd
and the
be
problem is they are going to be compared to the original X-Men movies, but they're going to be compared to the best parts of the original X-Men movies. People are going to forget the parts that weren't as good and remember the good parts. So the second the first X-Men comes out, whoever has to play Wolverine, if they even cast them, which I feel like you have to have a Wolverine, they're immediately going to be compared to Hugh Jackman's character, and that's going to pull down the movie. Like whoever they cast is not going to be able to live up to it. It doesn't matter because
they've
that's
got
an
to.
untouchable, and it's going to be
It's
the
like
same with some of
James
the other
Bond.
characters too. Like how do you replace? How do you have another Magneto? How do you already done it
But
twice? You've done
okay,
it twice with two different people
and
successfully.
no, and think
You
about
know?
who it is. Think about who it is. You have James McAvoy, Patrick Stewart versus Michael Fassbender and Gandalf. I'm forgetting his name, but you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about. But like that, Ian McKellen, like that
yeah.
level of like Shakespearean actor. And I was talking about it. You heard me talk about it for National Treasure. That like you need to have actors, that level of great actor to sell this sort of lines, these sort of roles, these sorts of like movies. But I don't know if they can. I don't know if they've got the humility to do it. I mean,
Well,
like I do like their Fantastic Four casting. I
yeah.
think that's a great group of actors, everyone from like Yes Chef to like friggin' Pedro Pascal. But even then, I'm highly skeptical. And what if Deadpool Wolverine ends up being fantastic?
Well, I mean, I expect it to
I
be
don't think
fun. I do expect
I,
it to be fun. I expect to enjoy it, but
we're gonna be there opening. I am gonna be there
no,
opening weekend,
I
opening
plan to
night.
be there
But
because
like
I do want to see it, and I also know this. I mean,
for
I'll
Hugh
say this
Jackman,
now.
Hugh Jackman.
I'm saying this now before it's been released or even pre-released or screened. I think this is probably going to be the biggest movie of the year in terms of box office
Oh,
revenue and of
yeah,
discussion.
oh,
You're going to
R-rated
see,
R-rated movie.
yeah,
They're tracking $200 million.
yeah. This is going to be the movie that makes the
R-rated
most money. So I
R-rated
need to. I
movie.
want to see it because I want to be involved in
Bro,
whatever the
don't forget
conversation
about
is.
Despicable Me. Don't forget
Oh
about
yeah, well,
Despicable Me.
not counting kid. I mean, I guess you could say this is kind of a kids movie
Mike
too, but
White
not counting kids
written
movies.
Despicable
But
Me.
I don't know. It's like okay, so when they redo the X-Men movies eventually, and they have Giancarlo Esposito as Magneto, because I'm sure it'll be something like that. He's a good actor, and I like him. But the thing is,
Fantastic actor,
but the
but
thing is,
still.
in your mind, you're going to be comparing him to Ian McKellen, and you're going to be like, "Huh, who is better, Giancarlo Esposito, who's a good character actor, or Ian McKellen, who is a legendary, long-careered actor who absolutely
But
defined the role?
but
It's not going to be.
my
There's
no no
nowhere
no
to
no.
make it
But
good.
my argument is going to be Daniel Craig, is that he came in and everyone's and Heath Ledger to an extent where they're like they came into the role. People are like, what do you mean that guy? No way, that's not going to work. But then they put in the work and it genuinely came out as fantastic. But the thing is, The Dark Knight, Casino Royale. These are some of the some of my favorite movies of all
Yeah,
time. Some of the best movies ever made, in my opinion. They're not going to get that sort of like writing behind them to like where they're as an actor they can actually get a text that's going to support them, right? And you have people like Nicolas Cage who can like really make it work, and the script is really there for some of his movies, but it's like this is not going to work. I don't
Well,
think it's going to
and
work.
like you said, the point you keep making is that there's going to be too many characters in the movie, anyways. Because if you have 8 characters in the movie and it's a 90-minute movie or a 2-hour movie, let's say, so you have a little over 10 minutes for each character's arc. I get what you're going at there, and I think when they do the X-Men movie, they're going to try to go whole hog with it and have everybody there instead of building up to it slowly. You know,
They're
why is Iron Man a
they're not going to
successful
make
movie?
yeah,
There's
they're
one
not going
guy
to
in
do
it.
that.
There's
They're not
one
going to
guy
do
who's the
phase 1.
focus. Yeah, the
They're
phase
not going to do
one
phase 1.
set the groundwork because it gave every character at least a 90+ minute arc that they got to handle and define the character with. And when you bring someone in like, the recent characters who are coming in without even having their own movie, it's like, why do we care about these people? We've had 20 minutes with them in this, 2-hour movie. Why am I supposed to care about them? And
But
that's what's going to
I'd
happen here.
also I want to harp on this. Like that means we're giving praise to Marvel for doing that, but I'd argue the same feather, like the reverse side. That look at the Captain Marvel. I like Brie Larson as an actress. I think she's fantastic. But that movie emotionally, it felt like they were checking off a box.
They
Like they're
were.
like making references. Like, oh, how did Fury get his eye? And it's like I don't want to know that story. No one wants to know why
Yeah.
Fury
Who
has,
cares?
like
Who cares?
exactly. It does not matter. And that's what Mangold's talking about. It's almost this journalistic thing. It's all for him. He's like, it's like making the movies for the Catholic Church where it's like, oh, this episode about Jesus, like, okay, do you like approve of this? Here, can you expect this? No, that's not what this is. And it's like, they're fundamentally not understanding it.
Well,
And it's no, look at Joker. They made Joker. Joker made $1 billion. Why did Joker make $1 billion? Even though it's literally just Kings of Comedy, and it's a
Kings of
Scorsese
Comedy,
riff.
Taxi Driver, yeah, yeah.
It is a Scorsese riff, but it's got fantastic acting. It's got great score, shot extremely well by Larry Sher, and it's like it's even though it's got pieces that typically wouldn't work all together, they work, and it is a lower budget on top of that, and they made $1 billion. Why do you think we have the second movie coming out this year?
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't spend its whole time Easter egg hunting. That's the problem with
Hundred
all these
percent,
these
hundred
movies.
percent.
And then what we were just talking about, they spend so much time showing you how Nick Fury got the eye, right? Or lost his eye. That's Easter egg hunting. Does that serve the story? No. That's just so somebody guy on YouTube can make a 10-minute video about how Nick Fury lost his eye, and then that gets 200,000 views, and that increases your product's relevance. That's not to tell a story. That's not to tell a
And
compelling story.
it's Captain Marvel, Solo. They both fall under that line, but
Yes.
Furiosa this year falls under the same product, but it doesn't feel that way because they actually wanted to tell a beginning, middle, and end to that story, and that's all it is. You can go
Yeah.
watch Fury Road and be amazed by it afterwards, but still, that is just Furiosa's story, and it
It,
feels like it.
well, and I don't think it's wrong to say that the way they did it in Furiosa works and the way they've been doing it in some of these Marvel movies doesn't. I think you can have the
Hundred
nuance to
percent.
say that
Yeah.
Furiosa losing her arm. Sorry, spoilers for Furiosa and I guess Mad Max.
No, bro.
Furiosa,
It's not my
Furiosa,
fault. Y'all haven't seen
yeah.
Genius.
Furiosa losing her arm, when they show you that, they don't harp on it. It just happens. It's part of the story, but they don't harp on it and make it a big deal that, oh, we're going to show you how she lost her arm, or we're going to show you, it's just, this is the story we wanted to tell. We're not telling this story just to check off a box of an Easter egg, because there's a million other things George Miller puts in that movie that he does not fully explain to you. So it's not like he's trying to wrap everything up. He's like, I'll give you this little treat because this is part of her story that's important, but I'm not going to spend the time checking every box off about her story, and we're going to skip like 20 years at time, or not 20 years, but we're going to skip years at
Yeah.
times, so we're not showing you everything. I don't know why I'm defending myself preemptively. There's a difference. If you don't know it, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
But that being said, actually, my soapbox was about Children of Men, and that this is very much the same sort of movie where it's like, and I didn't realize that Children of Men is kind of like a Western in that sense, where it's like you have a reluctant hero who is going to help do this amazing thing, and that's just it. There's something compelling about that, and both of them they revolve around a world where children to some extent are not being made anymore, and there's something compelling about it's very science fictiony to me, where it's like you have to go into science fiction to like say something about our world, And that's what it's saying, right? Where it's like even the most apathetic person, when put in the place of trying to do something good, you'd hope that your protagonist does something good.
Do you want me to piss you off a little bit real quick?
Go ahead.
I've only seen half of Children of Men, the first
That's
half.
fine. That's
I
fine. And when you
remember
watch
I
the other,
queued
when
up.
you watch the whole thing, you're gonna be like,
I,
"Oh, dang,
I will
I
because I
fumbled."
liked it. I
Because like
remember
Alfonso Cuarón, that's my
I was
second
either
favorite movie from
I was
him.
either in high school or early in college, and I
High
watched the
school,
first
high school.
half.
It had to be
Yeah,
because
something.
I blame because he wanted us to do the 60-second oneers and all this, and he's the one who wasn't understanding that if you're actually making movies, you don't need a 60-second shot. You need to have cuts in your movie because editing is what dictates your story. It's not having these
Yeah.
shots. That's not, you're not dictating story unless you have like a 60-second shot of two actors sitting there. If you have freaking Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep sitting there like having coffee talking about the post.
To be fair,
Stupid.
I don't think he was there to teach story writing. I think he was there to teach more the
Teach
fundamentals of using a
filmmaking.
camera. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that was his job. But
Yeah, I know. I don't think he
I
would
get what
care
you're
for it.
saying. I get what you're
Story,
saying
like
though.
but that's the thing. I always talk about story. But it's like you have to talk about story. Story dictates action, right? Story dictates everything else.
No, it does. But again, we were high school students. I think his job was just to make sure that we actually
I
understood how to
don't
use
blame
the
him.
camera
I don't
and how,
blame him one
you know what
bit.
Spielberg
But
says
like,
with the horizon at the end of whatever Fablemans. He just wanted to make sure that we just were white balanced and we had the horizon at the right place. I don't know.
bro, the white balancing was something else.
And most people couldn't figure out the white balancing. So I think the story stuff was secondary at that point. And now, I
Yeah,
mean, now do they even have cameras in that class anymore? I wonder if they just have to use their phone and just like,
they probably got some
yeah.
nice cameras too.
Like
But
at this point, the iPhones that they have probably do as good a job as what we had. So
true, that's actually true. We didn't have much to work with, but we made it. I mean, we had enough to work with, but we made it
yeah,
work. It was good. But on to the Oscars. The Oscars for the 2017 movies is the 2018 Oscars. Zach, drop us into this legendary year of movies.
yeah. So for the 2018 Oscars, for anybody who doesn't remember, this is the Get Out year. This is the Call Me by Your Name year.
Phantom
This
Thread,
is the Phantom Thread,
Three
Disaster Artist,
Billboards.
Dunkirk. So it was a pretty good year. So Logan only got nominated for one category. It was writing adapted screenplay, which ended up being won by Call Me by Your Name.
Deserved.
It did also have it had the Disaster Artist nominated,
Actually,
Molly's Game nominated, and Mudbound nominated as well.
for adapted screenplay, Call Me by Your Name won. It's been about 7 years since this movie came out, and I'd argue otherwise. I don't think that's the best screenplay here. I think James Ivory adapted his own story well. I think you have Molly's Game, you have Aaron Sorkin in here. It's not even his best work. Disaster Artist, that's a great adaptation. Logan, that's a great adaptation. Mudbound, that's a great adaptation. But I'd argue those three over the other two, mainly Logan, because this is not, they didn't look at Old Man Logan. Yeah, it's an inspiration, but it's not what they wrote. And this is them actually going ground up, making an intentional movie. And I think the Disaster Artist, it sells just as well, doesn't it?
I was about to say my scorching hot take is that Disaster Artist is probably my pick for this category.
Yeah, no. Understandably.
Yeah.
But in the same sense that like Logan is mine because I feel that level for Logan itself.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to get to the best actor category because I think there's a lot of discussion here. So,
Here, before we hit Best Actor,
okay.
I think the production design on this movie is really good. But put it this way: every single nomination that The Darkest Hour got, just give it to this. Just give it to Logan
Gosh, Lee.
because
I saw that like by myself in a theater, like in the middle of the day, and I really didn't like that movie. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I really couldn't. It was not very good.
I'm surprised they had 9 spots. They have 10 spots for movies to actually be nominated for Best Picture. 9 were taken. They didn't put a 10th. This easily would have been in the 10th spot because it's not like it didn't get the people gave this movie its praise correctly. But why is it that The Darkest Hour gets nominated for Best Picture and all these things, but Logan didn't? Especially when Logan is trying to change the mold. And the year after this, Black Panther Into the Spider-Verse was heavy at the Oscars.
I think it's because Disney put a lot of money behind getting finally their first nomination, and I think at this point Fox didn't care whether Logan got nominations or not. That's my
I
not
wouldn't
hot
be
take. That's my
I wouldn't be
Sad
surprised
take.
if they got sold at that point or something like that. It happened definitely right after this. So,
Because just these companies, put a lot of money into trying to get
oh,
things that are
every
maybe not deserving nominated.
everybody's putting money behind it. I'm sure
Yeah.
whoever produced The Darkest Hour did. And
Yeah.
talk about such, I mean, okay, best actor. I wonder who won for this.
So yeah, let me tell you what's going on with Best Actor. I remember I was pissed off when this happened, even though all the precursors knew kind of led to this happening. So the nominees for actor in a leading role, just going to say ahead of time, Hugh Jackman's not one of them. Washington for Roman J. Israel,
Eh.
Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out,
Mm-hmm.
Ray Lewis for Phantom Thread.
Oh
Jesus
yeah.
Christ, he
Oh
did
yeah.
not win. Timothy Chalamet for Call Me by Your Name, and then the
Fantastic.
winner was Gary Oldman in a fat suit for Darkest Hour.
And no, that's not fan. We're not fat shaming here, okay? That's not what this is. But
I'm not. I'm just
no,
calling it
no,
out.
no, no. But legitimately, y'all gonna make a movie about like this terrible human being that was Winston Churchill. I am Indian. I am not gonna get on my soapbox about that. But this did not deserve a win. This was just y'all don't know how to nominate Gary Oldman in his other movies, so y'all gave him an Oscar finally. That's all it is, and it's disrespectful. I don't think
Yeah.
Denzel deserved this nomination. I don't think Gary Oldman should have been there either. Easily,
Nope. Well,
easily, it should have been
it was a
Hugh.
good acting performance, just in a horrible movie.
That I mean, same thing with Denzel. I'm not saying Denzel isn't one of the
No,
goats. Gary Goldman is one
but
of the goats. Daniel Day Lewis, one of the goats, and you got
yeah,
young actors here, Timmy and Daniel, who are both very, very new to the scene. Essentially, not that I actually am prepped today because I listened to an hour and a half of Daniel Kaluuya talking to Roger Deakins about his career this past week, and he was maybe 25 when he did Sicario, and he did this after doing some plays, and this somehow elevated into being this phenomenon. Like Get Out was a phenomenon in the best way possible, and I think Logan caught the culture the same way, and that should have been nominated because that's a much more dense performance. It's a performance that definitely could have come off like if you're doing the same acting, same character for 20 years, there's an authorship there, and you could definitely take some sort of. I'm not dunking on Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. for his performance, but that's the other half of this. And people were talking about it for Endgame, like, oh, he should have been nominated. No, he
no,
is gonna wait. Did the Oscars already happen? He won for Oppenheimer, right?
yeah, he
Okay.
won for
You,
Oppenheimer.
you can
Yeah,
tell my mind is not here today, but like in that sense, but like that makes sense. That is deserved, but it
yeah,
wasn't deserved for Avengers, but it is here. Like I think Hugh, it's hard to sparse this, but because Timmy, Daniel Day Lewis, Daniel Kaluuya, all fantastic performances in my opinion on the same level. But I mean, I it gets into campaigning and politics, for no reason after that.
yeah. I mean, simply Daniel Day Lewis, Daniel Kaluuya, and Hugh Jackman should have been the three top contenders for this prize, in my opinion. I think those were the three best performances given by a lead actor that year, and the fact that they left him out in a
You,
I don't know.
you know
Did
who
Hugh
my
Jackman, does he ever get nominated for Oscars though? I feel
bro?
like he's
I
been
think the problem is
underserved
that
for
we
years.
we we saw Prisoners, and we were like, oh, this is it. This has to be it. He's gonna get nominated. Jake Gyllenhaal nominated. Didn't happen for either one of them.
No,
You know who my fifth
I
man is though for this year? It's got to be Ryan Gosling for Blade Runner. It has to be
yeah,
as K because yet again that's a silent performance. It's almost like what Laura does in this movie, where it's like he has to play so much just off his face. And as much as we love Ryan Gosling opening
oh,
his mouth, what did I forget?
missed one. We missed one.
Who?
We're stupid. Ethan Hawke, First Reformed,
Oh,
man. He should have
never
been
mind.
up there.
Never mind. You're right. You're right.
Oh my god.
I would sub out Daniel Kaluuya for Ethan Hawke actually, and Daniel he would agree. He's got the humility. You have to listen to him. He's such a cool person. Daniel Kaluuya is like he's gonna be one of the best actors of all time, easily. Like he is.
Yeah.
He's so cool.
He's got a gravitas to him when he shows up on screen, that magnetic energy that is very rare in leading actors.
And he's like, yeah, I don't want to do movies just to do movies. I'm going to do movies because I want to do them. He's like, no paycheck money. I don't want
Yeah.
paychecks anymore.
He's
It's
selective.
crazy. It's awesome that he's gotten to a point where he can do that. But that being said, this movie came out in 2017. It's been 7 years almost to the month since this movie came out. What is the legacy of Logan for you, Zach?
It's kind of unfortunate because I feel like Logan hasn't actually impacted the decision makers at these big studios at all. I haven't seen an attempt at a movie like this again, or if they have, it hasn't been very good.
No, they haven't.
I
No,
the audience
they haven't done this again.
audiences, yeah, they haven't, and audiences love this movie, and I think they want more movies like this. But unfortunately,
Joker, Joker technically
yeah,
counts.
Joker, yeah, but Joker, like I said earlier, like Joker counts, but doesn't do
Does it
any of the
really
same
though?
stuff this
Yeah, does
movie
it really
does.
though?
I
But
mean,
it's like it's the
like
yeah, it's got the
I
same
know
like
they
on
kill
paper.
I know they killed off Iron Man, but he would have been a prime candidate for a movie like this. That's the type of character performance that would have been primed for this. Even like Captain America, maybe. Like I don't know. There's probably something they could have
RDJ
done with one of these.
RDJ would have
But
pulled it
these,
off.
but
Imagine a
yeah,
RDJ
RDJ would have.
Logan type movie where it's just him talking and like with
Yeah,
characters. It would be amazing. It'd be fantastic.
yeah,
I
yeah.
would I would go
He
see
would have
that
been
like
perfect
three
for it.
times. That
Yeah,
would be awesome.
that's my what if is that I feel like they feel like they had to kill him for his arc at the end of Endgame, but that would have been the one character that would have made the most sense to do a Logan type movie with. And since they didn't do it with him, I don't think we're going to get a Logan type movie again. I don't, or at
So
least for a long time.
now that you've seen Furiosa, they do want to make a Thor 5. I think he
With
has
who?
it. I don't want to. If it obviously, I'm not.
Ty,
I'm not talking that
Ty,
far because it's probably gonna be Taika,
yeah,
and I don't want
who's?
to see it.
Well, then he's not going to do
No,
it.
but
He's
no,
not
but
going to do it
no, but
right. Yeah,
theoretically, let's say it was Mangold. Let's say it was any other director with a with their head on correctly. What do you think if there was a this sort of story for Thor? I think that
I
I
don't
think
think
I th-
Hemsworth's the right guy
he's got
for
it.
it.
He's got it in him. Trust me, he's got it in him.
I guess I don't know. I don't think that's the right character for it because
It's
that's
not the
always been
right,
more of a comedic relief character at this point. Like
but
it's not a serious character. It's
they,
not a character that has the depth to
but
it.
my favorite serious moment of Infinity War is when he's on the ship and he's like talking about like how his brother died and all this stuff's happened to him and he's really been through a lot. That's like my favorite moment of that movie. So I think he's got it in him.
Is any of the
I'm not saying all the story, like all the
yeah?
intertangled story and Love and Thunder, none of it makes sense. But I'm saying if there's one character, one actor that I'd want to see do it right now, currently, it has to be Hemsworth.
Yeah, is there a surviving Marvel character who actually could do this at this point? Like, I don't think there is. That's what I'm saying. I know you said Hemsworth, but outside of him, then since we disagree on that, like, is there another one? Like, no, that's how weak the cast is at this point that they have.
And
I
it's
don't
like
think there's
I think
another
no,
guy.
they've got other actors, but even then, they're not in prominent roles. Essentially,
They're
like
not on the right page, or they're
like
for it.
Will Poulter, he's in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which you haven't seen. I think he's great in that movie. I think he's an amazing actor, but he's very small role, and it just wouldn't work. Adam Warlock, it wouldn't work.
No, it doesn't work for any of them. It doesn't because they really got rid of the original cast, and I'm sure that was a mutual decision for some of them. They had an opportunity to do this, and they didn't do it, and that opportunity now will not come again for a long time. I think another franchise that would have been really good for this would have been a Batman movie. I know they just did the Pat Patterson one, so he's a little too young right now. But if they continue to develop the Patterson movies, I think by the end of it,
Ooh,
you
bro,
know, Dark Knight
no,
Returns is a
no,
very Logan-esque
Keaton,
story. So
Keaton,
doing a Dark Knight Returns type story would work. We haven't seen a real Dark Knight Returns type story. Dark Knight Rises isn't anything like Dark Knight Returns, and I think that is the
no.
Logan of the Batman universe, and that would be very interesting.
They have Michael Keaton. They
Oh,
wasted
they
him
wasted
in
that.
the
Oh
Flash.
God.
The Flash.
Oh Lord.
They spat on this man's legacy doing that movie.
Ugh.
But like as a Batman,
He
but
would have been perfect for it too, because
he's
Birdman kind of
still
does some of that
he's still
stuff.
perfect for it.
Yeah.
I would love to see him in a Batman Beyond, but that's a whole other thing. But like in a Logan
Yeah.
story, just imagine it even like if you put his Batman in a Seven Seal story or like a Christmas Carol type of story, it would be fantastic because you're just sitting there watching him through his regrets and all this stuff. And I think that Michael Keaton could have played that so well. That I just thought about that. That'd be awesome. But see, that's the thing. I think about it. They could make the movie for $50 million max, but even then, they wouldn't do it because it's
No.
hurting, quote unquote, hurting their brand.
Yeah, it's not cohesive to whatever 50 movie story they want to tell that half the audience is not even alive for yet.
And they're forgetting
Yeah,
this.
that's not good.
They're forgetting this, that this made risks. They were taking risks
Yep.
making all these. Like even the new 52, they're always trying to do other stuff. They're always trying to churn out stories. Yeah, obviously they're not all going to work, but that's how you get to greatness. Like, you just got to find it. Someone's going to find it. But they're not letting them find it. And Logan is definitely, I think the legacy definitely is that they have to look at it. Go look at this movie, because they're not doing it.
Yeah.
Mangold, I will say, legacy wise, Ford versus Ferrari is a better movie for me. I love that movie. I rewatched that
It's a
movie.
great
It
movie.
is like, by the end of that movie, just like this one, emotional ending, fantastic movie.
One of the most dad movies of all time.
And you're looking, I mean, congrats, I'm going to be a father. No, but
Oh God.
but I'm joking. But Mangold, Indiana Jones 5.
Yeah, his legacy's in a weird place because if you look at his filmography, he's actually very uneven. Like he has hits and then he has misses. And I didn't realize that till I actually read through it
Yeah.
yesterday. And so Indy 5 was a miss. So that's not out of
And it
character with
was,
some of his
it
other
was
stuff,
a,
but it felt like he was the best director for that
it
movie
felt
when
like
it,
he was the best
besides like
director.
getting Spielberg or something,
But it
like
felt like everything that he's talking about with Logan, it feels like he betrayed what he's talking about for himself to serve this narrative of Indiana Jones. And
which tells you what though?
I don't know.
That there was
There was
studio involvement
involvement,
most
but it's like,
likely.
yeah, of course
Yeah.
there's studio involvement, but it's like, it feels like they didn't have enough confidence in him, or like they were just misguided as to what that story needed to be. And I think they
Yeah.
emotionally land the story for him, but from the like the first 20 minutes is a no, like, I enjoyed watching it, but it's a waste of time. It felt like No Time to Die in the worst way possible. And
Yeah.
20 minutes is wasted. They wasted so much money on that CGI to, like, whatever. That's a whole other thing. And then
But that I like that first 20
I
minutes
liked the
though.
first 20 minutes too, but by the time I was watching it with my dad, he was like, we're watching the chase in Morocco. He's like, let's go
Yeah.
to sleep. Like, this is boring.
Well, it is tough when you show a very young and agile and active Indy, and then you go back to the modern Indy who's Harrison Ford, who's
But
like what,
but
90?
but that's
He's
the thing.
80. I don't
That's
know.
the thing.
You see it.
He's talking about how flashbacks. Didn't want to have a flashback to the X-Men mansion or have all these other characters. I don't want to go back to something else and then set expectations for the rest of the movie. But that's what he did in Indiana Jones. He betrayed himself.
That's a really good point.
Like,
Yeah,
that's,
that's a
oh
great
my
point.
god. And I don't mean to dunk on the man. I really don't. I'd say this to his face because it's genuine criticism that I feel like he'd agree with. Like, I like,
Yeah.
that's all it is.
It, yeah, and I mean, it was a tough position to be in because there was no need for an Indy 5 in the first place. So they were making a movie that there was a need for a Logan movie. There was not a need for an Indy 5 movie. And so he was starting at a bad place to start with an actor who was too old to really do the stunts anymore and without a real clear focus on what they wanted from the movie. And it
They
just went downhill from
they
there.
could have done it. I think with the same pieces, same cast, same sort of story, they could have landed it. They really could have, but they land the plane for his narrative, but they don't land the plane of the movie itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
like them, spoilers for Indy 5, but I like them going to the past and all that stuff. I enjoyed
I
the part of that.
hated that.
I enjoyed
I hated
it.
that.
See, that's the thing. We're divisive. I enjoyed it, but even
Yeah.
then, everything
That
else,
made the movie drop a whole, like, star or point or whatever in my head the second they did that. Oh,
I'd argue that the middle of the movie and the first part of, like the first, like the second half, it's like, I don't know, it's uneven.
not to get too much into the Indiana Jones, but I feel like the movie, and I'll tie this back to Logan, it stays on the edge of the supernatural, or Indiana Jones movies are at its best when it's on the edge of it. When you get to, you don't get to see what's inside the,
Yeah,
what is it called?
the box.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, the box. You don't get to, when you go see the Knights Templars in the third one, it's like he gets to drink the water of eternal life or whatever, but then he leaves. Like it's
but
very much
the
on the
best
edge of the exemplary, the
best moment is that,
extraordinary.
right? It's the best moment of all the Indiana Jones movies is when he's trying to go for the chalice, right? And
Yeah.
dad just looks at him and the shot's fantastic. He's just like, no, it's like, let it go, right?
So, and then the fifth movie, they just go whole hog into the past, and to me, that betrays the
Yeah,
whole being on
it does.
the edge. And Spielberg's good with this, Close Encounters of the Kind,
Yeah,
right? It's that whole thing of that you see the edge of something extraordinary, but you
but
don't go all the way in because then your
exactly.
imagination fills in the rest.
That's why Midnight Special, like that's a very small version of that, where it's like he's trying to like essentially save his son's life, and by the end of the movie, he just goes off into this like essentially invisible alien world, and you have no idea what's going on. But like,
Yeah,
there's a beauty behind like letting him go and all this stuff, and there's a catharsis there. But bro, I don't know.
yeah. Well, and it just goes back to tying it back to Logan. If they would have showed us what happened in the flashback when Charles lost his mind and potentially killed a lot of people, it's better to just not show that and to just let the audience
It's
fill in the
more
details on their own.
agonizing.
That
It's more agonizing
yeah,
for us to, because you know these
because you
characters.
see it through Charles and Logan's eyes, because
But
instead of seeing the flashback, you see their
no,
pain.
but you're saying like audiences like me who have seen all these movies, you know who's at that house and you know what
Yeah,
that means. And it's horrifying.
and you can fill in the details in your head instead of them having to do it, like he said in the podcast, and then he betrayed himself when he did Indy 5.
But I mean, Daphne Keene, who plays Laura, she had a show. What is it? You know, The Golden Compass. They made a show like that, like same books.
Yeah, HBO did.
HBO,
Hmm.
really good show. She's in the Acolyte actually right now, Zach, but they don't
Oh,
deserve her. They really don't. She's she's got the juice. Patrick Stewart's a goat. Stephen Merchant, obviously doing his thing. He actually directed a movie after this, Fighting for My Family with Florence Pugh. Good movie. But John Matheson, who shot this, he's worked with Ridley. I think he just shot Gladiator 2 again, so I'm excited to see that. But the legacy of this movie is strong, and we're not. I mean, I just hope more people rip it off. I don't know what else to say, and it's not rip off the same story. Rip off this approach. That's what matters.
the whole point of what we're trying to say here is that movies should continue to take chances, and the fact that studios are very concerned with not screwing up is actually screwing it up. And it just took longer. It took more movies for audiences to get tired of it, but because there's been no change in what they try to do and no risk taking, people are starting to turn off to it. And you've already started to see the box office not be as, let's say, guaranteed for certain movies,
Yeah,
and now they're trying to pull out more nostalgia, and they're going more and more into the safety net, and that's going to at some point bite them, and it's already started to.
and on top of that, it's like they just have to reevaluate. They've created a devil within streaming and all this stuff, and it's like you're gonna have people who come out for max of 4 movies a year, and Mangold talks about it, is like the system is not made to help you make a good movie. That's why he's so like he's turned off by it. He's trying to like shut it all out because he's like the system's not helping me make my good movie. I have to help myself, and it's a bit all over the place, but it's just you got to know where to go, and it's hard to do it even more and more and more now, especially with everything that's been going on with the system itself, whether it's the strikes. It's there's so many different things going on. But that being said, MVP Zach, who put the team on their back for Logan? Who's the MVP?
I'm trying to decide if I have a crisis in faith in what I picked right now. I'm just going to go with it.
Go ahead.
So I actually have Sir Patrick Stewart as my MVP for this movie, and I'll tell you why. Not to take away from Hugh Jackman, who's one of my favorite actors of all time, but I'm a sucker for when a great actor in old age has to play a role where they're starting to lose their cognitive ability. Recently, that was Anthony Hopkins in The Father, just one of my favorite performances ever.
John Lithgow
But
in
mhm,
Rise for the Planet of the Apes. Fantastic performance.
I think that's a really hard thing to do, and I think it also is a hard thing to do as a person, to be an older actor having to deal with being, what happens when you age, having to act that out on screen while also knowing in your life that you are at an elder age. I think there's a lot of just introspective thinking you have to do when doing that role. But whenever Patrick Stewart's on screen, his ability to go in and out of a cognitive haze and help the audience understand when he's lucid and when he's not is an incredibly difficult assignment for an actor. And he does it with such empathy for his character that I just love the total performance from him. And I think this movie doesn't have the same pathos without him giving a performance like that.
Oh, 100%. I love him in this role. And it's because he had authorship within that role, but it's also like him having to deliver lines like, oh, try the new quesalupa at Taco Bell. And it's like, yeah, the line is funny, but it is so heartbreaking to come from him too at the same time. And
Yeah.
Stewart tackles it amazingly. And he only had like 4 weeks on the movie. Like, he didn't really get to go to too many places while they made this movie. At the compound when they're essentially trying to escape, Mangold in the commentary is literally like, okay, from shot to shot, like within that one scene, he's like, okay, this is Louisiana, this is New Mexico, this is Louisiana, this is New Mexico. And it's like there's so much cutting around it, but like I'm glad that he could be in this movie, and he brings a regality every time he's around,
Yeah.
and
I
it's needed.
There's a warmth and there's a sadness to it because I think most people, and if not, you're fortunate and it will happen at some point, but a lot of people in their life have to eventually deal with somebody they know and love, being not exactly the same person they were before as they age, where you could see moments of Charles being Charles, but then those moments are surrounded by moments of him not being as lucid and
Being
him being
lost.
this other person.
Yeah.
And having to do that is just so difficult and so heartbreaking, and he is able to deliver as he always does. And I just absolutely adore his performance in this movie. It's one of my favorite Charles Stewart performances in any movie he's ever done.
And on top of that, it's very real, like the way, like, because I've had it happen in my life. Not getting into details, but like I've seen it happen, and the way that like Hugh and Stuart bicker, I'm just like, okay, this is real. This is very real.
Yeah.
Like, it's never happened to me to that extent, but like, and I've seen it happen to other people. I'm like, okay, this is extremely real. If anybody's ever seen stuff like this, or whether it's someone with, cancer or any other problem like that, just, old age. And it's very much a thing where this movie felt like it's just a progression of us growing up with Charles, with Xavier, that he is an old man, and this is just a horrifying reality that could happen to him. And they explore
Hmm.
it extremely well. And
Hmm.
that being said, my MVP is Scott Frank, James Mangold, and Michael Green. It's the script. This is genuinely, like, it's from the script up that they've really intended this movie to be that way. And Hugh and Stewart, Daphne, like, they give fantastic performances all around. That script, they've really had a text to work with here. And you can't really say that a lot for these sorts of movies, which kind of
No,
sucks.
the care they have for the characters in this movie really jumps off the screen, jumps off the page. This easily could have been bad. This easily could have
Yep.
been Old Man Logan tearing people apart. This could have gone a million different ways, and instead it went the right way.
And it's hard to get there, especially in this system. And they could have, I mean, like, I compared to Into the Spider Verse, they got the freedom, and even that movie is memorable for the same reasons for me. Where it's like yeah, the suit's gonna fit. It's like, nah, I got to do my own thing. There's a lot of themes that work, and they explore themes correctly. I love this movie, man. I really do. It's a hard movie to love, put it that way. It's almost as hard as it is for him to love his own daughter. I don't there's a version of this movie where it's just Jerry Springer. He's like, you are the father. And he just runs away. He's like, I'm out of here. Deadbeat Logan. That's the sequel. That's the Deadpool, but companion movie, Zach. I got one that you're gonna laugh at. I don't know if you're gonna laugh, but it's a real one. But what are your
Well,
companion movies?
yeah, let me give you two because off screen, Vikash reminded me earlier that I was missing the one that I totally should have thought of. So let me give you my original and then I'll give you my other. So, first one I want to say is if you really like this Western, this neo Western type vibe, another one that came out just a few years before, Hell or High Water, directed by David Mackenzie. It's
Fire.
just another post Western movie that puts character work and human stories above action and adventure storytelling. So, I would totally check that one out. And then the other one, and definitely want to emphasize to go look for this one because I think because of how this was released, a lot of people missed it. The movie Bad Education. Was an HBO release that was technically considered a TV movie, but it was filmed as a real movie. It just
It
the
was bought.
HBO released it.
Yeah,
It was
HBO
bought by
bought the movie.
HBO, and then I guess they decided they wanted to compete at the Emmys instead, so they just gave it that title, but it is a real movie and it has Hugh Jackman as a lead character. I say this without second thought that Hugh Jackman in Bad Education is giving the best performance of his career. If you want to see Hugh Jackman do everything and do it well and be charismatic, be vulnerable, be frightened, be strong, everything you want to see from him in a performance, and you love Hugh Jackman like I do, go watch Bad Education. You will not regret it. That is an incredible tour de force of a performance.
And it's just a fun movie on top of that.
Yeah, and it's a fun
It
movie.
is a much lighter fare than this one, even though he packs in the juice for it. Because it's just about
Yeah.
teachers and some other stuff going on, but it's a great movie. It's on Max.
Oh, and
HBO Max.
Hugh Jackman was a PE teacher too, so he definitely brings some of that into his performance.
Real authentic, he did some real research in his life. That's what it is.
Yeah.
The movies that I guess Mangold would recommend is Little Miss Sunshine, The Wrestler.
So funny.
Fantastic movies, man. Unforgiven,
It's
fantastic.
just funny because Little Miss Sunshine is like the complete opposite vibe of Logan, but I get why he's saying that's a recommendation. Like I totally get it.
Paper Moon, fantastic movie too. But it's all these things put together. That I think some of my favorite movies are a bunch of things jumbled together, and this is very much that. For me personally,
What about Rebel Moon?
I'm not going to talk about that. You already know that. Director's cut coming soon for 2 movies. It's like, just make TV shows, Zack Snyder. We don't need movies from you. But Ford versus Ferrari, which I find is extremely compelling like this. It's much lighter fare, but it is just as hard of a movie. Like by the end of the movie, you're just so invested in there. And just from face value, it's like, oh, it's a racing movie. Nope. There's so much more going on with that. It's something about just the drive as a human being. It's more comparable to like a Jobs. It's a character study in a way of like learning and changing as a human. Maybe, after a certain age, you might not be able to do something and them trying to figure it out and there's so many elements to it. Even with Ferrari's in that movie too, as a person, not Adam Driver, but older man. I don't know why I keep bringing this movie up, man. The only other blockbuster type movie where they took this iconic character and humanized him and really gave him an arc is The Last Jedi.
Let's not get into the Last Jedi discussion.
No, but think about it. Think about it.
I don't need that part of the internet, coming at us. I don't need that part.
But okay,
I don't need that.
If you want to go some good recent superhero movies, if you haven't already seen these gems, obviously the Batman Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, it's the only stuff that comes close to this for me, bar for bar. But that's Logan. Like, Logan doesn't really have much competition, but that's kind of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah,
make more movies like this. Make more movies like this, please.
What'll be interesting to see is, was Logan the last gasp of individualized, smart, thoughtful superhero movies, or is it showing that there's still a chance these type of movies could be made? I think that the jury's still out on that one.
Which is crazy to say because it's been 7 years. Like, they're trying to make
and it's not looking good.
They're trying to make freaking Blade, which is just a vampire gonna kill vampire, but they can't get.
They're on their 3rd director.
They're on their like 5th director, and Delroy Lindo just left the movie too. He's like,
oh man,
and it's like, come on, just like it's not that. It should not be this hard to make a movie, and it's like you're getting so caught up in the process rather than just doing it. You could literally have no script and go make the movie, and it's probably going to be better than not saying it's going to be better than the OG Blades, but like it could be just as good.
The most interesting thing to come out of the last 10 years of Marvel is going to be whenever Kevin Feige leaves and does a tell-all, or someone writes a tell-all. That's going to be the most interesting thing, because I want to know if they realize what's been going wrong and what happened. At this point, that'll be more interesting than anything they put out recently.
20 years. It's not even going to happen right now, because I'm thinking of what's
going to happen at some point.
I'm thinking of what's on the docket, and even like Fantastic Four. I love all those actors. Not really excited for it. Genuinely just not. And like the only thing that I saw that I really like had a soul and like really related to was Miss Marvel. And that's because they have like Iman Vellani is like the charisma she has is made for the movies. She is that charismatic, and they let her play with it and they make it run. But you watch the Marvels, she's good in it, but they nerfed the crap out of that movie too, man. So it's like I don't know what they're doing. I really don't. They got to ride this train. And as like for all the criticism we have of Marvel, I will end on this note. We don't say it just to say it. We say it because we want it to get fixed. Because if they fixed it, bro, it'd be a different world.
Because there was a time before where these movies were fun, everybody in the culture enjoyed them, and there wasn't debates over how they're destroying the movie industry. And I don't know if that genie can ever go back in the bottle, but I
It
think we
will.
criticize it because it's something we once loved or still love, and we want to see it get better.
At some point, it's going to hit carrying capacity, which I think it already has, and it'll
Yeah.
whittle, which it needs
Yep.
to. Which, I mean, I say that as someone who grew up with this stuff, and I'm always going to watch this, but I don't expect everybody to like this. I really don't. It's like once in a while, if there's a movie like Logan, I might recommend that to like regular people, but I don't expect them to always watch this. Like they need,
Yeah.
you know me, that's my perspective. I sit in my corner and I'm always going to be here. And a lot of people are always going to be here, but that's not everybody. And they need to know to make good movies rather than catering to a wide audience. So, and
Yeah.
you can make movies that are great that cater to wide audiences. Typically, they just animate them, and it's Inside Out 2 making, bro, when I went to the theater, they packed out 20 showings. People are seeing it with everybody because they can see it with everybody. There's a merit to that sort of movie. They actually, like Pixar, when they actually put in the work, they put in the work and it works. So, take some lessons. I don't know what else to say. And even Pixar, I'm gonna get off of this, but Pixar is literally having to whatever they're trying to
Yeah.
make more sequels. Toy Story 5, just churning out more sequels for the things they have rather than making new things.
So, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Marvel, Pixar, what do they all have in common?
Disney, Bob
Yeah.
Iger.
The Disney Corporation has created these beloved franchises and are now in the process of ruining them. And if they don't find a way to right the ship, and I don't think they will since they're a publicly traded company, these franchises are now going to be worthless, and that's their own fault.
Walt Disney he'd tisk tisk. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, why y'all making a live action Lion King movie with Barry Jenkins, literally one of the greatest filmmakers we have, but he's relegated to doing that, bro. What? Come on.
Yep.
In love for art. That's all I gotta say. This we it's all with peace and love, y'all. We'll see you next time on a much more happy note.
See you next time.
Bye.